Good afternoon and welcome to the May 2nd, 2023 New Bern Board of Aldermen work session. I ask Alderman Royal if she would mind giving us a prayer.
Thank you, Mayor. Let us pray. Father, in Jesus' name, we thank you for yet another opportunity that we can come together as a board for our city. This workshop, we pray that your will be done, our deliberations will be fair and just, and that our wisdom will come from you. We pray for guidance from your spirit today, and that whatever we do in word or deed, it will bring you glory. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right, Mr. Hughes, number one, discussion and review of fiscal year 23-24 budget.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Aldermen. We're happy to meet with you today to present our proposed budget for FY 23-24. And so in front of you, you have a big, thick notebook. And so just want to get you a little comfortable with this. And so there are a variety of tabs once you open the book. The gold tabs are the summary reports. There will also be some information with the major general fund and the enterprise funds, as well as other funds. The tan tabs are going to talk about our staff positions, dues and subscriptions, travel and training, and then they're going to get into each department. And so we're going to go through all of these as we go through this afternoon. If at any time you happen to have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and speak up. So as we were working on the budget, we looked at a couple of goals that we'd heard from the governing board over time. And of course, I think the main one is to continue to provide outstanding essential services to our citizens as well as our customers who don't live within the city limits. We heard from you that you wanted us to consider including the second phase of the salary study, so we addressed that as well. We also looked at a COLA and a merit in here. We looked at updating the land use ordinance. We looked at future citywide planning, and we also took into account technology and communication enhancements. Now, all this is aside from ARP funds that we are currently doing a variety of other projects with, and it does not include anything having to do with Stanley White Recreation Center or the elevator project. So, we're going to go ahead and turn to our summary report, and you will see the overall budget summary. The adopted FY23 budget, including all of the funds, was $139,940.32. The total proposed budget combined, we're looking at $150,434,665, and that's broken down. General fund, $49,746,000. The water operating fund, $12,733,000. The sewer operating fund, $13,786,000. The electric operating fund, $60,954,000. The solid waste operating fund, $4,374,000. There are some smaller funds that we have. The emergency 911 telephone system, that's at $156,000. The employees' benefit insurance, we are self-insured, so that's what that number is from, $7.8 million. The municipal service district, $421,000. Special police revenue, $21,900. Public-private partnerships, that's $10,000, and that's for a facade improvement grant. The MPO plan grant, $305,455. E-sharing with the U.S. Department of Justice, $36,050, and e-sharing with the U.S. Department of Treasury, that's $8,000. So we're going to go into more detail on these things, but this brings a total of $150,434,000. So the next tab you will see is staff positions.
Mr. Hughes, for the benefit of those who are trying to follow along, being that we didn't get this information ahead of time, would you make sure that I am reading what you're reading, if you could point it out as you're going along? I know you were reading from the budget summary.
That's correct,
Yes. But if you just make sure that I'm following with you, whatever heading you're on.
I sure will.
Thank you, sir.
So on the next tab, you will see staffing and position history report. And if you will look at the top gold part, the third column over, That is FY 22-23 funded positions, and you will see below that the amount of positions that each department has. At the very bottom, you will see the total positions that are currently funded in this FY fiscal year, and that's 499 positions. If you will look at the far right tab, this is the recommended positions for the next budget year. So we are proposing adding 2 positions to this coming year's budget. One of those positions is in human resources, and that is for an administrative assistant position. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the HR. And the second position that we are proposing is heavy equipment operator in the Public Works garage. And the biggest reason we're seeing that is we're spending so much money on our big ticket vehicles like fire trucks and things like that. Where we
You're
send
talking
them out.
about a mechanic, not an operator.
Mechanic, yes, I'm sorry. We send those things out, and it costs so much in labor to get something fixed. If we have someone in-house that can fix those, we'll reduce our overall costs.
So that should actually be a flush, right?
It should be. We hope it's going to be a more positive.
Other things,
one.
okay.
Yes. The next tab over, you will see dues and subscriptions budget. This gives you a general idea by each department, some of the dues and subscriptions citywide that we are paying for. I'm not going to go through the list, but I'll give you some examples. So under the governing board, you will see that we are a member of the School of Government Foundation, so we pay a certain amount each year to that. We're a member of the New Bern Area Chamber of Commerce, the North Carolina League of Municipalities, the North Carolina Black Elected Municipal Officials Association, the National League of Cities, ICMA, North Carolina Metro Mayors Coalition, and a few others. And so that's based for each department, so you'll have an opportunity to look through that. The next tab over, you will see the travel and training. And so this is an all-encompassing list of travel and training that departments have requested and that we are proposing. Then the next tab is capital expenses.
What page is that, Foster?
19, page 19 for capital expenses. So we are going to go through this list on page 19. So citywide, department heads requested $11.6 million in capital expenses, and we are recommending about $8.2 million. And on page 19 at the very top, this is broken down by department and administration. We're looking at $20,000 for a new video server for the PEG TV channel. Under technology, $375,000 for the virtual system hosting infrastructure. It's a technical refresh. As everyone is aware, over the years, everyone's getting away from paper and typewriters, and everything is computer and virtual, and so that's how the city of New Bern operates, and we continue to advance in our technology, and this is something that is needed in order to continue to offer the services to our citizens. In police, we're recommending 10 police cruisers at a cost of $621,500. Under fire, we're recommending to replace 2 motors for the rescue boat at $60,000, replacing the 2006 pumper Quint with a fire engine pumper. The build time is approximately 2 to 4 years, and the cost to replace that is $800,000. Proposing to refurbish an existing reserve engine to be utilized as a first-out engine if the temporary fire station for Highway 43 corridor is approved on down the line. That cost us $350,000. And we're proposing to repair and repaint a refurbished body of one of the fire engines in the amount of $50,000. So total capital for fire rescue is $1.26 million. For parks and recreation, proposing $20,000 for security cameras at some of the parks, a box grader and the skid steer attachment for $22,000, landscaping grapple and skid steer attachment for $7,500, and a skate park bill for $150,000. Total Parks and Recreation capital requested is $199,500. For Development Services, for GIS, we're requesting $35,000 to replace a vehicle. In Public Works, requesting $45,000 for a lift upgrade and an alignment head in the garage, $25,000 for a tire balancing machine, $50,000 to replace the traffic signal control boxes at George and Broad and Oaks and South Glen Burnie intersections, $350,000 to replace the existing street sweeper, $20,000 to replace existing asphalt roller, $75,000 to get a compact excavator with attachments, $130,000 to replace a leaf collector truck, $25,000 for a gooseneck equipment trailer, and $250,000 in sidewalk and curb improvements. Total requested for Public Works is $970,000, and for the total general fund, that's $3.481 million in capital request. On the water side, capital request, $50,000 for various rehabilitation projects, $48,000 to replace a pickup truck, $18,000 to replace a mower, $350,000 for various water system improvements, $154,000 for a backhoe replacement, and $63,000 for a pickup truck replacement. Total for water distribution is $683,000 of their request. For sewer, $150,000 for filter control valve replacements, $350,000 for biosolids processing and sludge building rehabilitation, $250,000 for various sewer system improvements, $250,000 for lift station rehab, $16,000 for sewer camera upgrade, $50,000 for replacement of locating equipment, $125,000 for dump truck replacement, $60,000 $120,000 for 2 pickup trucks, and $150,000 for pump engagement storage facility additions. Total sewer capital, $1.46 million. For electric, $40,000 to replace a vehicle, $200,000 for Kell Road expansion, $450,000 to replace a line truck, $80,000 to replace a service truck, $400,000 for the Old Town River crossing system improvements, $250,000 for the Greenbrier system improvements, $20,000 to replace a fusion splicer, $20,000 to replace OTDR, Charlie, what is that? Some fiber items, $60,000 to replace a Ford truck, $400,000 for meter data management, and $80,000 to replace 2 additional vehicles. Total electric request is $2 million in capital. For solid waste, $200,000 to replace a route truck, and $75,000 to replace a chip trailer. Total for solid waste, $275,000. Grand total of all funds for capital requested is $7.2 million. So, if you'll turn to the next tab, which is fees and charges, and it starts on page 21. We have a wide variety of fees and charges that we charge for a variety of services. And so we're going to focus on the items that department heads have made requests to change, and those are highlighted in red on your sheet. And under fire, which is item number 3 in blue at the bottom part of the page, the fire department has made a few recommendations. The first one is for the fire hydrant flow test. That price had been $50, and they are making the request for that test to go to $75 per hydrant. For the plan review, they are recommending $75. For the new business inspection, $75. For the ABC ALE inspection, $75. For special requested inspections, $75. And for care homes, $75, all rising from $50. For the standby personnel, minimum 4 men on the engine company, they had been using the FEMA equipment rate plus labor. They have requested to adjust that to now $250 per hour as a flat fee. On page 22, halfway down the page in red, you'll see emergency responder radio coverage systems. That fee had been $75, and they are now proposing to change that to $100 plus $2 per device. And for fire alarm and detection systems and related equipment, adding $2 per device. And at the bottom of the fire, where it has life safety violations, first offense would be $100, second offense would be $200, and third offense would be $300, and these are for repeat inspections. On page 23, we're in Parks and Recreation, and on the lower part of that page, Honor Tree program has been stricken as a program. On page 24, approximately halfway down the page, the Yes Camp fees and charges. They're proposing to increase the cost of the camp from $25 to $35 for the first family member, and to from $20 to $30 for each additional resident in the same household. That's for city residents. For non-residents, they're proposing to increase the rate from $35 to $45 for the first participant, and from $30 to $40 for the second participant. At the bottom of the page, a new fee and charge, mobile stage rental. There are 4x8 sections of wooden mobile stage that are requested, and so they're proposing a daily rental fee of $10 per section. With planning and zoning, there are quite a few rate requests, and so we're going to have Jessica Rue and Matt Boswell come up and go through this.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Aldermen. I'm just going to walk you through some of our changes that we're proposing in our fee schedule. I think they may look a little bit more overwhelming than they actually are, because we've reformulated how we're calculating some things, and in other places we are just making changes for consistency. So it came to my attention the first week I worked here that staff had been kind of advocating to make some of these changes for a couple of years, and they never really moved forward under the previous leadership. And so this is an attempt for us to modernize some of our charges, and some of them are pretty overdue, so I'm going to walk you through that. I think this is an important conversation to have for several factors. Most jurisdictions, when it comes to planning and development fees, went through some significant fee adjustments in 2016, and then again in 2021. Of course, in 2016, we were kind of coming out of that recession that started in 2008, 9, 10, and people were really hesitant to raise fees at that time. And then again in 2021, we saw that when the inflation started hitting and we were in that pandemic. And so we've sort of missed two periods of fee updates in development services fees here in the city of New Bern. And so this response, we saw during this time, during those two updates that traditionally were happening in other fee schedules, we had a significant building boom here in eastern North Carolina. We saw unprecedented gas prices, which are very connected to the services that we provide out of development services, because more than half of our staff is in the field, and we do have a fleet of 11 vehicles. And then we had that robust inflation over the last few years, where simply buying supplies and paper and inspection tickets and paying employees, the cost of doing that went up significantly. And so those factors that really are connected and impact our business operations have been a little bit ignored for some time, and this is an effort to correct that. And there are some services in development services, we are actually losing quite a bit of money to actually provide, and shouldn't be, because in my eyes, I look at them as user fees. Related to that, but different from the economy, in 2018, the building code changed, and there's a lot of fees that are listed in our fee schedule that we can't legally charge for anymore, so there is no reason to actually have them listed out. And then again, you've heard me talk about 160D, which was that big change to development law that merged city and county laws together, and the verbiage and laws that changed there is inconsistent with what is reflected in our current fee schedule, and probably should have been updated 2 years ago, and so I'm asking to do that for us now. So what you'll see reflected here is that we remove those fees that we do not use or cannot legally charge for. We remove fees that haven't been used in years. I've asked all staff members about some of them. They can't really tell you why they're there or still exist, so that suggests to me that they may be removed. And then we added some fees that we need to be charging for, such as floodplain development, ABC permits, solar panels, just these newer development types and permits that we're required to issue that are not accommodated under the current fee structure the way it's set up today. This is also important so staff can process the fees consistently and not just be labeling everything in our system as miscellaneous because it doesn't exist in our fee schedule, and creates a more solid accounting and record keeping for us moving forward. So a couple of key highlights I'll call your attention to. Our HPC fees increased. The current ones are just simply not commensurate with the amount of staff time that is spent on the reviews. Almost anything in the HPC area goes through 2 separate reviews, and since 160D, there's new signage requirements, and so we have to buy a sign to put out every time one of these things goes. So the $22 really being charged right now is not even paying for that sign, never mind the staff time. And so the fees that are proposed to you are in line with some sister cities in Wilmington and Beaufort who do very similar work. In fact, they're actually a little bit lower. We added some specific land use fee categories that are right now kind of being entered as miscellaneous or being entered as something that is not exactly what we're charging for. So things like this are a family care facility. If we have an ordinance for it, it needs to be required, that needs to be connected to a permit. And of course, we have a regulation that they're 2,500 feet apart. So we needed an actual permit to issue connected to a charge for that. We added a rezoning fee or a zoning map change. This is something that we do almost monthly in our department, and no fee actually existed to charge for this, and so it was just being entered as a miscellaneous fee. You'll also see a text amendment fee, or that's a modification to the land use ordinance to change the actual text. So, for your knowledge, to process a rezoning takes quite a bit of staff time. It goes through a development review, it gets a staff report, it has to go to our planning and zoning board, and then it has to go for a public hearing. And so by the time we add the 2 required public hearing ads, at least one 10 days before, no more than 25 for those 2 separate weeks that we're required to do to meet state statutes, and post signage on the property, and mail letters notifying all of the neighbors, we are losing money on that process, not even including the staff time spent on it. And so I think $500 for a zoning change is an appropriate fee there, and that is in fact what most of our neighbors are charging for that. Text amendment requires all of those items, however, a little bit less staff time, that's why that's $375. You'll see here that we're proposing $50 for a separate zoning permit. Previously, historically, the city of New Bern has been including a zoning approval as part of the building permit application, and this is leading to missing some things, and so we are separating out and have already started using a separate zoning permit. That is because you need to look at parking requirements, locational requirements, spacing requirements, anything special that has to do with the change of use of a building, anything special that may exist in an overlay district, and that is not accommodated when that is included as part of a building permit application. And so the current process also is merging those together, and the state of North Carolina likes to see us separate the fees that we are generating from our building inspection side of our department and also our land use and planning side of our department. So the approach that this is proposing to take is looking at permitting more as an a la carte cafeteria rather than a buffet issue of this. And that's very important to make sure that rules aren't being overlooked. A sign permit is now just going to be a zoning permit. In some cases, signs do require electrical and building permits. The quasi-judicial hearings are proposed to be $375. Those are our cases, of course, that go through our Board of Adjustment. They require the same public hearing as signage and mailings that a rezoning does. So to give you an indication of what we're spending to make this process happen legally, it's very similar. And then our subdivision and site plan approvals have been proposed to go up to $375 and $400. Those are massive, massive staff time commitments on our end. Not only is development services staff going through and looking at that, almost every department head we have in the city of New Bern or somebody they designate comes every 2 weeks to review these plans at a development review committee, and that's very expensive. And so this is still much lower than some of our neighbors are charging, but I did hesitate to jump too much at once on those review processes there. So I'm comfortable with what's proposed. Those are the major changes in the land use section. We've also streamlined permits in our building section, and this is where it might look a little bit confusing to you when you're looking at all of those red lines and changes. It's really not as overwhelming as it might look on paper. We changed our basic building inspection fee to use the approach that most jurisdictions in Eastern North Carolina are now using, which is to charge a base fee. And then once you go over that 1,000 square feet, start adding per square footage. This is very commonplace. It separates residential and commercial permits commensurate with the amount of work and level of expertise it takes to A, review those permits, and B, the level of certification the staff person needs to have. Of course, a level 1 building inspector can go and inspect anything that is just residential, but once you start getting into commercial buildings and commercial uses, you need those level 2 and level 3 building inspectors, which are really at a premium, and the state of North Carolina is seeing a massive shortage of, because building inspectors are retiring out much faster than they're being certified. This proposes to standardize trade permits to $75 for residential and $125 for commercial. This is standard with most of our neighbors in Eastern North Carolina. Most people made the jump to $75, $125 in 2015 and 2016. It adds in specific permitting fees for solar, floodplain development, ABC permits. You'll see those in red listed at the bottom. We have proposed a $10 fee to get a sign returned. We are seeing an increase in the amount of right-of-way signage and spending a lot of gas and a lot of staff time for people to want to come back and get their signs, educate them where you can use the signs when they're not in the right-of-way or out in the county where maybe they can use their signs and not be breaking an ordinance. We'd like to be able to recoup some of that. You're seeing a $25 very nominal permit modification fee. This is because we're frequently seeing contractors come in and submit a whole pile of houses in a subdivision. Then they ask to come in and change a subcontractor on there, and it is very, very time-consuming on staff to go back into all those permitting records and change that. So that is an attempt to recoup that. That is also a fee that most of our neighbors have added in the last 5 to 10 years. And then you'll also see some consistency by eliminating some of those cumbersome numbers like $22 and $54.
Any questions on those? All right, so we're going to move to police. And that goes on page 27. And the only fee that has been requested to be changed is the off-duty fees, trying to keep that more in line with what the actual cost is of salary and benefits, so that's going up to $45 per hour. Then public assembly, which is parades and festivals, section 8, also on page 27, it's the lower part of the page. Recommended changes are clarifying the barricade rental fees. We have wooden or plastic A-frame barricades. Those are $5 a piece. Then we also have barricades that are concrete and water-filled. That rate is $60 per barricade, plus the labor rates for a minimum of 3 staff, which is required for setup. So to move those bigger barricades, we've got to have heavy equipment to move those things out. That's why the cost. The majority of our events only require the $5 barricades, though. Also, city labor increases for fire, recommended $50 per hour. For police, $45 per hour. For public works staff, $45 per hour. And for recreation staff, at $45 per hour for special event-related activities. On page 28, under Public Works, and this is the top of the page, driveway permit has been adjusted to include the first inspection, and that goes from $20 to $30. And if the driveway has to be re-inspected, there's a re-inspection fee of $20. This time I'd like to ask George to come up and talk about solid waste and the refuge fees.
Good afternoon, everybody. We have on the current rate schedule a previously determined and anticipated fee schedule increase associated with our contractual obligations with GFL, who does our refuge collection. Our current rate schedule is reflective of the annual increases if the consumer price index or inflation for the southern region increases a certain amount. This past year it was 7%. GFL's contracts are capped at 3% for residential and 5% for commercial dumpsters. So while the rate of inflation was higher, they're capped contractually for these rate increases. We're aware, which is not reflected in the number on each sheet right now, that the Solid Waste Authority at Tuscarora, where we do our disposal and GFL does their disposal, had been considering a tipping fee increase. So that is per ton charge. They currently charge $40 a ton. The Solid Waste Authority had not raised their rates in 10 years. So that was not included because we did not know, one, if it was going to pass. We did not know what rate was going to be included at that time, if any. So what we are understanding now is on their board agenda for May 11th is a rate increase of $2 per ton. So that number contractually goes back through GFL, so it'll give us a rate increase contractually to pick up that additional tipping fee cost. So what we're going to be doing is recommending on the second meeting in May, a rate increase to the solid waste fees. What we're looking at right now is a rate increase of approximately $4, a little over $4 for residential service. What that will capture is the contractual obligations we have with GFL, the anticipated tipping fee increases, and also the associated fees or associated shared services that were not actually captured with solid waste that is provided to them either through other city departments or public works. And so we're going to be at about a $4 per month, $4.07 is kind of what we're looking at right now for residential monthly increase. And then those numbers will be increasing by the yardage of a commercial container. That'll be reflected of the size of the container. But, so we're trying to capture everything to more accurately capture, one, the revenue that is generated to fund solid waste, so we're not working through some other funding source through the city, and also reflective of the GFL contractual obligations and those associated with the solid waste tipping. In addition to that, in this budget, we have included funding for an actual rate study, so utility rate study, that would look at all of our expenses, our cost, our carrying cost of equipment, everything associated with solid waste. What I didn't want to do was to have that going on while we were going to be going negative into our anticipated cost. So we know the contractual obligations, we anticipate the tipping fee going up, and we also recognize that the shared services weren't accurately captured. So that's kind of what we're looking at, and I'll have those numbers for you to look at and vote on the second meeting in May, and then I'll put an effective date 1st of July, as will the increased tipping fees if they pass on the May 11th meeting.
George, on the commercial dumpster services, does every business within the city limits that has a commercial dumpster, is it through this process?
Some are contracted with us and some are privately contracted, but it goes through GFL.
So what would cause a difference in being contracted through us versus going direct? Any ideas?
A lot of times, the refuse, during that process, if you've got a new construction or an upfit, it's more related to construction dumpsters.
Okay.
But if you're within the city limits, you have to utilize GFL.
Okay.
And board, I just want to remind you, on number 10, under refuge, those fees and charges that are in red, those are inaccurate based on what George has just covered, so we will be coming back to you at a later meeting with that.
Those numbers are initially calculated with anticipation of the CPI index increasing. We weren't sure what number that was going to be until we got it back and got a confirmation from GFL on their contractual obligations. So we'll have a more accurate number for you on that second meeting in May, but we do anticipate a rate increase that's reflective of those three things.
And when is that contract up?
That contract ends June 30th, 2027.
Any questions on solid waste?
And I will say this, even with our rate increase, if it's $4 for residential, we're still going to be on the low end of neighboring communities. Some range, so Greenville, Moorhead, Kinston, they're all somewhere in right about $16, $17, all the way up to $31. So right now, we're significantly lower than any of our surrounding municipalities.
Solid waste also operates as an enterprise fund, which means it has to be self-supporting, so we just pass those costs along, our cost along to the consumer.
George, question. And
Yes,
this just has to do with the trash pickup, correct? Has nothing to do with this fee, the fee this change is coming later, has nothing to do with when you put like leaves and debris or whatever?
Yes, it does. It also
Okay.
covers the
Even though the city
the
picks that up?
the vegetated pickup, and also the brown and white goods pickup is
Okay.
also covered in that fee.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any questions? Okay, we're going to move on to utilities. In the fee schedule, no utility fees are requested to increase on the schedule you see, but this time I want to ask Charlie Bouchard to come forth and give some updates on what we're hearing from the Kempa, and also to give an update on the one of the projects that we have been working on.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Aldermen, and women.
Afternoon.
As the city manager said, I'd like to take a few moments and tell you about a few things that are happening in the utility. pledge? And I apologize, I made myself a few notes so I don't get too far down in a rabbit hole and get too far in the weeds, so I'll try to keep this as high level as possible. But starting off, our County Line Road Substation project, as we called it in the past, early on, I was estimating $10 million. Now I'm at $20.4 million. The purpose of this project, for those that may need a reminder, provides resilient infrastructure for the electric system, makes additional capacity available to prevent interruptions, provide the ability to reroute power to those areas that are distressed, and it makes additional capacity available for future economic growth. We've also referred to the project as the Electric System Capacity Improvement Project, and we created a project fund, I think it was last July, and we started that project fund with $500,000 in it to make ready. So engineering, preliminary engineering services, engineering estimates, purchasing of land, soil testing, those type of costs that I need to spend to get this project going. And the next step in that process is to bring back land acquisition agreements for you folks to consider, and I hope to have those in front of you soon. In the meantime, the Department of Energy announced a $10.5 billion spending program, the Grid Resiliency and Innovation Program, and this project fits beautifully into that funding. So in December, I submitted a concept paper to the Department of Energy, and they encouraged, after receiving that concept paper, they encouraged me to submit a full application. They thought we were very well qualified. We met every aspect of the grant. My hopes are very, very high. We submitted the application April 6th. Total project cost, as I mentioned before, is $20.4 million, asking $13.2 million from the Department of Energy, leaving us with a local contribution of about $7.2 million. And a lot of that's in-kind labor and then some material costs. Hope to have the notification of the award in July or August of this year. The program is moving very, very, very fast, so I don't know if they're going to be on schedule at the Department of Energy or not. As soon as we submitted, actually the week before we submitted our grant, the Department of Energy was out soliciting and trying to find folks that will grade the grant. That's how fast things are moving. But we qualify very well. There's a special category for small utilities, and so much of this money has to go to small utilities. That's a good earmark for us. I'm very, very hopeful. But concurrently with that, I think we need to start considering revenue bonds and explore that market in case we don't get funded, or if we do get funded, if it's not quite the entire allotment, or if we just need to come up with the $7 million on the match. So I think it would probably be in our best interest to knock on those doors and try to get that process going, what revenue bonds may or may not look like, and then make a decision down the road later if we don't receive funding.
Charlie, when is our AMI paid for?
AMI,
Yeah, the financing we did for that, when does that roll off?
the debt service for that, I thought that rolled off. I'd have to get some help from
I
finance.
can look.
I was thinking it was 7 years, I thought, from when we took it out.
We're real close, I know that.
I can look it up while you continue.
Okay.
It's gonna take
Okay.
a minute.
Thanks.
So I included just a very high-level overview map of the project, and if I can draw your attention in general, this project occurs mostly on the James City side, but it benefits the entire system. If you look towards the right corner of the map, you'll see Carolina colors. You might be able to identify Waterscape Way, Old Airport Road, and then the key landmark is County Line Road. And we have to connect to the Duke transmission system. About a mile off of County Line Road, that's a constraint of the project. And then the rest of the diagram kind of shows you some additional lines that need to be interconnected and built so that we can reroute this power once the substation is built. So in general, the substation's going across the street-ish from Blue Water Rise, and it's in very good position not only to reroute power, but add future growth in this area that is growing very rapidly. Next in the utility, transformer shortage. I think we talked about that 6 months ago or so. It hasn't changed. Market conditions are still the same. Seeing pricing increases up to 9 times the cost. Deliveries are out 24 to 36 months if we can get people to even give us a quote. We recently started exploring international markets, particularly the Chinese, assuming there's no pushback on doing business with the Chinese. Possible better delivery dates, but the pricing still looks the same. We're struggling right now to get a coherent specification that we can understand and make sure we know what we're buying. And the same thing goes with terms and conditions. And working through an emerging distributor market in the U.S., doing business internationally, they just can't whip out an agreement, a contract. It's a lot of back and forth and trying to understand what the product really is.
Charlie, can you give me, what is the price of a transformer? Wasn't it like 9?
There's all different sizes and types,
Right.
but the one that there's most pressure on is a 50 kVA pad mounted. That typically was $1,000. Now it's $9,000.
Okay.
And anything in between, we're seeing prices on.
I have a question also. Excuse me. What is the lifespan of a transformer?
We'd like to last indefinitely. We put them in service, hopefully 20, 25 years, maybe longer. Depends on snakes and wildlife and vehicles and inundated systems and wind. But we'd like to get about 20, 25 years out of them. Capitalizing them from a financial basis, I'd have to refer to Kim on what our capitalization rules are there.
Charlie, for the board's knowledge, one transformer, how many homes will that service on average?
On a 50 kVA, it'll serve about 6 homes, roughly.
How many?
6. That's the sweet spot for that size of underground transformer. But again, not all transformers are the same. Some are designed for overhead construction, some are designed for underground, and then the sizing varies of how much capacity that they can carry, and then also the voltage that the customer requires. That all varies, and that all it varies within the manufacturing process too. So in the manufacturer's world, they have to have the capacity in the manufacturing space to produce all of these transformers at all these different specifications across the U.S. So I'm guessing that's part of the constraints that we're seeing. So the pressures that we're seeing, April, I took a look at our inventories on just the 50 kVAs I'm talking about. That's probably we're seeing the most pressure because they're in most demand right now with new developments. We have 51 in stock. Minimum stock is 40. So I'm planning on holding that minimum stock, that level there, for our existing customers. I don't think we can compromise their service, and I need to be prepared to serve them should their electric service fail or their transformer fail. Overall, we've got about 2,000 of these in service. Don't know how old they are. Some could be a year old, some could be 20 years old. So keeping a minimum stock of 40, that puts us at about the 2% level of installed inventory. Is that right or wrong? It's a judgment call. I certainly don't think we need to stop 50%. And that number has served us well in the past, assuming we can get transformers in a quicker period of time. Other pressures that are on the utility, active projects that we have in place, large developments, building a lot of homes. They're in the works. They're turning dirt, and they want transformers. And I only have 11 left that I can give them. So I'm standing here saying, I'll give you a transformer when you fill up the transformer that I just gave you. So put 75%, put 5 customers on that transformer, and I'll give you the next one until I'm out. And then you'll stand in line with everybody else and wait until I get replenishment. I had 40 ordered. They were supposed to be here in July. That order was recently pushed back until April. My February order of, I think that was 50, that got moved up till December. So a lot of pressure. Who's first in line? Who deserves a transformer next? Those are a lot of things I'm going through on a day-to-day basis and trying to sort that out and be as accommodating to these developers and our community as much as possible. I've got 160 total on order, which I think accounts for all the projects that I know of in this particular size range. But I don't know when they're going to get here. I can't tell you when they're going to get here and make those promises. So as they arrive, we'll set them and get them installed. That'll probably put pressure on us down the road, because once they start coming in, everybody will want their stuff now, and our capacity to install is limited to what our capabilities are.
We pay for them when they arrive, correct?
Correct. So I haven't even seen the inflationary cost on these yet. We have to pay when they're delivered. The other part of this equation, projects that are emerging. They haven't started, they're conceptual. Some are conceptual on the back of a napkin. Hey, Charlie, let's walk out in the field, look at this job, what do you think? People have spent money and they've developed plans and they've put a lot of time and thought and energy into this. And how do we get started, Charlie? Well, a couple years on transformers, and when do you want to order them, and when should the utility take the risk on ordering? When do you promise me that you're going to build a house so that my investment is protected? Those are the challenges that are crossing my desk that I have to sort through and figure out how we navigate that. And hopefully I'm getting out to our developers soon in the process, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to make some tough decisions with the developers on when to order and when does utility take the risk on that.
Mayor, to answer your question about when the Kale Road AMI system is paid off, it's going to be December 1st, 2024.
And what's the annual debt service on that?
What's the what?
The annual debt service amount?
I don't have that.
Oh, okay.
So next, street lighting. I'm looking to gauge your level of interest in this. If you're not interested, I'll put it in a circular file and move on to other things. But over the 5 years that I've been here, I've been trying to make improvements to our street lighting schedules. And we've consolidated some schedules. I've been working on a little bit every year, so it's too much to digest at one time. So I've been breaking it apart. So we've consolidated some schedules, updated some product offerings, we've updated some rates, and now I'm looking at this Schedule 32C. And from the utilities perspective, I'd really like to omit it. It's very, very difficult for the utility to administer. We've made errors with administering it. I was asked this summer to audit it, found a lot of problems. We got those corrected. But in general, the way this rate works is, let me back up first by saying, to the utility, a street light is a street light is a street light. The cost of the street light is the same to the utility regardless of who the customer is. Right? My expenses are the same. So this schedule is designed for use by developers only where the developer is developing where the road is anticipated to be turned over to the city, adopted by the city. And during this process, electric infrastructure goes in early, street lighting goes in that early. Who gets the bill? By this rate schedule, the developer gets the bill day one. And I have to work out terms and try to find who to bill there. And then after the streets are adopted, then that bill gets transferred over to the city, to the Public Works account. Typically, street lighting generally comes across for your approval on those requests. In this particular manner, they would all just come over to the city once the street is approved. So harder to budget and plan for and coordinate between the utility and the city. Like I mentioned before, it's difficult to administer. In some cases, it adds some costs to the city. This schedule allows a 2% fee for the cost of installing it underground, or 2% fee for the cost of special poles. The developer, the customer, can pay that 2% upfront as a lump sum, or they can elect to pay it as a flat monthly fee indefinitely. And I can assure you the contractors that are doing this are taking the flat monthly fee, so the city is inheriting this fee indefinitely forever and ever and ever. And when I did some quick calculations, it pays off in a couple of years.
I'm not sure I understand. So when a developer builds a new development, they pay the utility department to install the light fixtures.
There's no cost for installing the light fixture. The cost of installation is built in the monthly rate.
Okay, so there's no cost for them to pay to have the light fixture installed. We install it, the utility department installs it, and they start immediately billing the developer who made the request for the street light as part of their new development.
That's the way it should work.
So what you're proposing, how is that different from
It
what
would,
we do?
I just bill it directly to the city, day one. I'll install it, rather than put it on this schedule, I'll put it on the city's rate schedule, and the city would be the customer day one.
So we would give up a little bit of leverage in dealing with developers for getting things done that they need to get done before we accept the streets if we did that. Is that fair?
If you could leverage street lighting against the streets, I don't know. The street lighting is not part of the street. It's not part of the right-of-way. It's infrastructure that exists there separately. The ratepayers, whether the street is the taxpayers, the residents, whether the street has been adopted or not, they're paying taxes, which I would think the street lighting is a benefit of those taxes. So the city doesn't have a ton to gain by this. It's more of a utility matter that if you folks like this idea, if you're not opposed to it, I'll continue to work on it. It would help the utility out, but I'm not digging my heels in and saying it's got to go one way or the other.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, in fact, we're using that leverage right now with a developer. You know, he wouldn't turn the streets over, wouldn't turn the community over to the city. We couldn't get him to bring the streets and sidewalks and other infrastructures up to our standards. And we finally found out that he wasn't paying for street lights. And we started building for the street lights, and by the Lord, he's getting ready as hard as he can now to turn this stuff over to the city. What do we charge per unit for a street light to a developer? Do you have any idea?
Don't hold me to it. In general, $8, $9 a month, depending on the fixture and the light, but that's a pretty standard.
Okay.
It gets you close. It adds up when you start putting in a number of streetlights.
I mean, I'd be in favor of it if they wanted to buy their own street lights. I mean, we just, you know, we install, they pay for the lamp post.
And then they're going to pick different kinds that we don't want to
Well,
maintain.
no, they have to be to his standard.
We put them all behind the meter and they can put whatever they want up, but that's kind of a different matter. I think our ordinance requires the installation of street lighting on newly developed roads, so I don't think we can get too far off of that. But if there's no interest, I'll leave it alone and move on to other things.
I think it's something we can discuss and mull over.
Thank you. So we're going to get a little more difficult.
Do I?
I said we're going to ramp up and get a little more difficult in the discussion.
Before Charlie continues, just to give you an idea of how much the city currently spends on streetlights annually, we're budgeted $750,000 a year right now, just to give you an idea. And that's a lot of streetlights.
That is a lot of streetlights. Is there a difference, or have we adjusted the rate that we're paying for regular street lamps versus LED lamps?
We've been adjusting those over the last 5 years that I've been here, and on the city rate, city 32, schedule 32, I believe those have all been adjusted to include new style LED fixtures. The old styles are now obsolete, meaning that if it's installed, we're going to stay with that price, but if it has to be replaced, you're not getting the old style back. It'll go back at the new LED and a new price. And we did that with the area lighting too, schedule 40. This one will need to be adjusted if we stay with schedule 32C. And then there's another really weird street lighting schedule that applies in areas where it's not a city street. It'll be a private road, and it's not owned by the state. And the rate is an administrative nightmare because the costs of the street lighting is supposed to be broken down per residential home and distributed on their electric bill. And to keep up with that, when the light goes in, which home is built, which home is not built, it is a real chore to administer. And then the utility loses when people aren't in those homes because we have nobody to send that bill to if their electric is off and the place is vacant. So that one is going to be the next one I bring back to you folks because it's a mess. The hard part with that one will be those that are on it, how do you get them off? And some of them you could go to kindly and say, please transfer this all to your HOA or your POA, and let's do business that way. Some of them are going to dig their heels in and say, no, we don't have an HOA, we don't have a POA. It needs to go out to everybody that lives here individually. Those we might, if we can make any progress on that rate change, those might have to retire in place, so to speak.
Charlie, one more question for you concerning street lighting. I was having a meeting with some DOT officials the other day, and they were telling me that this entire 42, Interstate 42 construction that's taking place in the James City area was going to have street lights. Said it was one of the only interstates in North Carolina that had street lights. Were you aware of that?
I haven't seen those parts of the plan yet. They haven't been working on utility relocations. It's a design build. They're designing as they go. So the next step will probably be seeing some of those street lighting requests.
How many transformers is that going to take?
Depends how many street lights.
Well, she said the entire area was going to be lit.
And that's a little weird. They might take a different transformer because some of that street lighting is 277, 480 volts compared to typical residential.
Okay.
Maybe solar.
Yeah, might be.
Power supply. If I use any acronyms here, please check me and ask me to explain myself. NCEMPA, the North Carolina Eastern Municipal Public or Power Agency. We're a member of that agency, along with 29 other Eastern Carolina members. That's where we purchase all of our power from. And we're on a long-term contract with these folks, started in 2015, and it goes through 2045. There's some options for some early outs. It's a very complex contract. The KEMPA does not have a staff. Doesn't exist as far as outside the contract and outside the members. but the contract is administered by electricity staff. And forecasting the rates and the setting of those rates inside that contract, it's real important that we keep in mind that all of that falls outside of our own budgeting cycle. And I don't think it will ever fall in our budgeting cycle. So to link these two processes together is very challenging, and it causes some frustration. It causes frustration with me, probably will cause some frustration with you folks as well. Typically, we've spent $35 to $37 million in our power supply costs. And these power supply costs are just to buy the power that our consumers need. This not the cost of delivering it to the house. That's a whole nother expense, a whole nother matter. This is just to buy the power that they're consuming. $35 to $37 million. NCEMPA's forecast has not been good. It's been pretty flat, pretty level since the time I was here. Over the last 5 years, hasn't been a lot of excitement. Even last year, the 5-year forecast remained very level. And I wasn't having this type of a conversation with you folks at that time because of so. Right now, they're forecasting a 5 to 10% increase. We could see that over 1 to 2 years. For New Bern, that's about a $1.8 million to $3.6 million annual increase just in our power supply costs. The drivers that we're seeing right now in this forecast are what I call a true-up component. It's several variable components in our power supply contract for 22-23. And what's really driving this right now is natural gas. And we won't know the final true-up until the end of June 2023. I really don't see natural gas taking a big nosedive between now and then. So I don't know if we're going to get any relief between now and June. So I think we should take this forecast seriously and consider what we need to do to prepare. The increase may not be noticed until October, November of this year, depending on how this process goes. What will happen in November is NCEMPA membership. The members will get together and vote. And New Bern has a vote, and I will cast that vote based on your interests. And a vote to pass that true-up cost. Right now, that true-up cost with NCEMPA is around $60 million, 3.6 to us. If they vote to pass that on to members, it'll come as a lump sum, or it'll come as a spread it out over the next 12 months. And they could likely do so. The vote could go the other way, where NCEMPA absorbs that true-up cost, and they absorb it from their working capital. And there's no cost passed on to the city of New Bern or any of the other communities, and everybody's happy. I think that's probably the way the vote's going to go, based on following the matter. But if they pass that working capital, if they absorb the working capital from NCEMPA's, if they absorb the true-up from NCEMPA's working capital, electricity staff is recommending a rate increase to build working capital. And working capital in their language, their words, is similar to our fund balance. And they have a marker of how much fund balance they should or shouldn't keep, much like we might struggle with days of service, days of cash on hand. Very, very similar concept. I'm looking at that very closely. That working capital and that benchmark of minimum working capital was all set in 2015 based on this contract. I think it was set conservatively. Nobody knew how this contract was going to perform. It's performed well, but I think it needs a little bit of oversight and challenges so that they're not over-collecting on their rates, just as we would be criticized if we were over-collecting on our rates. So I am taking a close look at that, but I can't tell you which way it's going to go. But standing here, I would say we should be forecasting 5 to 10% increases over the next few years. Some things to consider regarding rate increases. Again, what I'm talking about right here is just power supply. Doesn't include the cost of distributing that power and operating the rest of the business. But one thing I may need to know if we do talk further about rate increases is what's everybody's palate? Do we want single-digit increases on a more regular basis, healthy steps, or double-digit increases at less frequent steps? Some things we can do is we can take this NCEMPA's rate increase and just pass it on. Just raise our rates across the board to match this and hope that there's enough revenue to meet our expenditure requirements. We can also do some redesigning of our rates so that they better align with how the power supply contract is set up, and when the power supply contract rates adjust, our rates will automatically adjust, at least that part of it that is related to the contract. So that burden is not yours, it's not mine, it's just a pass-through. And then we could design in a multiplier in there that is our operating expense. And then we would have decision-making ability to raise or lower that component, but the supply side of it, it'll just vary with NCEMPA. Greenville's doing it. The other thing I'd like to see, explore, is passing these true-ups in a fuel supply cost adder, and pass these fuel costs on to our customers as they go up and down. We don't have any components like that right now in our rate structures. The other things we could do is we could do a full cost of service study and look at the cost of service across all of our rates, look at all of our revenue requirements, and that's a little bit longer time period to do something that way. In the long term, I think we're headed towards time of use rates. It's going that way in the industry for all the right reasons. This game of load management and shaving peaks and turning off thermostats and hot water tanks and running generators with a time of use rate, you can offer the customer their choice. Do you want to avoid the peak? Control your own devices, or you pay a higher price at peaking times, or you want to use during the off-peak time when the price is as low, and give the consumers those choices.
Charlie, what's to do projecting on their retail rates?
Depends who you believe. I heard scuttlebutt 20% this year.
But that's got to be approved, right?
Correct. That's what they're taking to the Public Utility Commission. What will be approved, I don't know.
20%? Wow.
And we got to be really careful when you talk to me about rates. There's a lot of components in our rates that they're not linear. So one thing that Duke did last time on their last rate increase is they didn't necessarily change the cost per kilowatt hour, but they added a line item for storm recovery costs. So now everybody is paying a residential equivalent for collecting the cost of storms. It's a flat rate. And they added some other features to their bill. Didn't necessarily raise the cost per kilowatt hour. Duke is also introducing a carbon reduction plan in the state of North Carolina. And they operate both in North Carolina and South Carolina. South Carolina is not crazy about it. So Duke is trying to figure a way to reorganize so that they can do it in North Carolina. And I was with Duke leadership a week ago in Wilmington, and they made mention for that to happen, they're going to have to blend our contract that we have here in the east that I've been talking about with the contract in the west. I don't know how that's going to work. I just told you it was expired in 2045, so I don't know what side of that argument we're going to want to get on yet. But it's a pretty dynamic situation. I don't want you folks to be unaware that it's dynamic, and if you these conversations are going on, and there are some exposures and risks to our power supply contracts.
And then my last question is, our debt service rolls off in 2025.
July,
How much is that annually?
3.2 million-ish.
Okay.
Our debt service, that you just asked about for the AMI expansions, we have 3.5 million that'll come off by the end of, or by May 2026. The Phase 2 AMI comes off December 1st, 2024, and that has $1,069,000 balance. And then the AMI expansion is the one that goes off in May 17, 2026, with almost 2.5 balance.
And one of the very passionate conversations I've been having with Nick Kempa and Electricity's staff is all of the members at debt service is coming off. Why do a 2%, 3%, 5% increase over the next 2 years? And then in 2025, for us, it's a 9% reduction. Don't do that to our ratepayers. We've got to find a different way to level that off. Haven't been successful so far.
So, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but we'd have to look at a spreadsheet, but could we not cover this proposed increased cost until this debt service rolls off when we do get that reduction?
In fund balance?
Yeah. We could do it about 3 years ago when this topic came up. It might have been before you got here.
Not with all the other operating costs that are subject to,
That was before the transformer debacle. But-
right, all the other inflationary costs that we're seeing. And it's not so much inflation, but I don't know how these rates were designed. I don't have any of that history. They seem to have been working over the last 5 years, collecting enough revenue. Good. But I don't think they were designed to recover much more inflation at this pace of inflation. So even if we could absorb the power supply side of it, I caution us that the operating side of the business has exposure to, depending on who we believe. I hear 8 to 12% consumer pricing index.
We also have the, recently when we did the transfer from the electric fund over to the MetroNet for $3 million, and then
Yes.
$500,000 to the,
Electric system capacity.
yes, substation.
And I'm building, I'm collecting revenue in the NCDOT fund. And that's looking very good. And they just kicked off the Thurman Road to Havelock section of the project. So that's continuing, but we're operating in plus in that fund.
We're paying about $250,000 a month or something like that for the debt services for the power plant.
Yes, sir. 280, I think.
$288,000 a month. Is that what you're saying?
3.2 million a year.
Hey, would it be to our advantage to pay that off? I mean, if we're paying $280,000 a month,
That's going to affect our cash on hand quite significantly though, and we're already, March's report showed us just under 80 days.
Why would we pay it off early?
I don't know. I mean, I was just wondering if it would,
I looked at
if
it
it
a
would
couple
save
of
us, I mean, if we could pay it off, we're currently paying $280,000 a month.
I'll take a note to look at that. I did it a couple years ago,
Might save us.
and by the time I get working through all the fees and legal costs to do that, it wasn't real attractive, and I stopped myself, but I can take a second look at them. And
Yeah, I think we've talked about it, but there was no benefit in paying it off early.
Well, other than you can reduce the rate, we would be able to reduce the rate to the customer.
I love what you're thinking, but I don't think that's realistic. I don't think we could pay that off and absorb a potential cost increase.
$280,000 a month is a lot of a payment. I mean, if you could, I reckon my thought is we have refinanced things before and saved a tremendous amount of money. I was just wondering if this would be beneficial.
If you do anything, you use it to absorb the wholesale costs that are coming at us.
Right.
I think that's probably the more realistic approach. I think when the debt service rolls off, especially the power supply, then if we looked at this on a 5-year projection, which you can't do it because I can tell you every time we've had this discussion, no matter who's been standing in your position, they've always said we shouldn't lower the rates and we were going to have to eat it. And every single time it's worked out in our favor. Now, we may have been fortunate, but that's what's happened every time.
So Charlie, what the information you just provided to us, from the camper with the rate increase, this is what may be coming down the line for us, for the city of New Bern, for these increased fees. But you really won't know until they actually vote in October, correct?
Correct. I'll have to pay close attention to this. June will be a very good marker for me because those expenses should be finalized in June, so July-ish. I should be have a sense of what the magnitude of that true-up is. Between now and that time, I can be working on ideas for rate increases to bring back to you so that I have some options for you to consider. And then not till October will I know which way this thing is going.
Okay.
But I might be able to put some imaginary numbers in some rate designs.
But then again, they might vote to absorb the cost, correct?
Most likely they will.
Okay.
Most likely, from what I hear, they'll absorb the cost, and then they'll turn around and do a 3% or more increase April, and then a 2 or more % increase April 2025.
Okay.
And then, 3 months later, our debt service comes off. And believe me when I say it, I've been very vocal with them about it. Why can't we level this thing off? Let's make working capital survive, and let's ride through this. I don't want my customers going up and down and up and down. We could, if we take the conservative approach and increase rates, we may over-collect now, or we may marginally collect now, possibly over-collect in the future, and then make a change. But from my position, I've always got to advise you to over-collect.
Kim, could you share with the board the debt service for the electric department, whatever Excel document you track that on?
Yes, I can. I can actually, do you want the full balance right now, what we have total for electric fund? Or you want the payoff schedule?
The payoff schedule.
Okay, I can do that.
Because we can pull the days cash on hand from the latest monthly report.
Yeah, so I just wanted to answer you, Alderman Astor. With our days cash on hand already quite, below the bar, the benchmark, and the increased costs, and then adding that as well, I just think it would put us into a position that I would feel very uncomfortable, especially going into hurricane season.
Okay, thanks.
That's all I had prepared to discuss. I appreciate your feedback and gave me some ideas, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie, for all your hard work. Appreciate you.
At this time, I'd like to ask Jordan Hughes to come up and talk about sewer fund.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor, members of the board. As Colleen gets us set up really here, I've actually got a couple of documents I went ahead and put in front of everybody. I've got a printout of the slides here, so if you want to make some notes, you've got that for you, as well as a little two-pager that's kind of a summary of the water and sewer fund for the budget for FY24. So just think of that as a Reader's Digest, condensed version of what's in the budget book. There's a lot in there, it gets kind of messy, so I try to condense that down to a single page for each fund for you to give you the high points. So I'm going to go through a couple of slides real quick, just give you an update of where we are with the water and sewer funds and some challenges we're looking at with those funds as we move into FY24. So as we move into FY24, we've got several things that are going to present some challenges to the water and sewer funds. First and foremost, and I think Charlie has highlighted this, and I think everybody may have, we've talked about this in any opportunity we've had over the last couple of years, but essentially our cost of doing business, our operational costs, the growth in those costs is outpacing our revenue costs. It has been for the last year and a half or 2 years. The long and short of it, it's just more expensive to do business today, and that rate is growing faster than we're adding customers and our revenue is increasing. So we're developing a gap between the money we're bringing in and the money we're going out. And that gap has got substantial enough to the point we need to have a conversation on what to do about that gap. And we'll look at some options for FY24. Some things that are adding to that and complicating our regional construction demand and growth. I use the word regional here, but this really is more of a North Carolina problem. This is a national problem. We are seeing unprecedented growth in the utility construction world, fueled by a lot of things. Here locally, we've got problems. We've got impacts from our NCDOT projects, a lot of housing development projects going on that all need water and wastewater infrastructure. And in big bold letters there, I've got ARPA and BIL projects. Those are our ARPA projects and our bipartisan infrastructure law money projects. So these are big chunks of money that have come down through the federal government, that have been distributed in every municipality in county North Carolina and across the country got ARP money, much like New Bern did. A lot of jurisdictions took that money and did water wastewater projects. So there's a lot of stuff out there for bid right now. There's a high demand on contractors. On top of that, there's money that was funneled down to the state through a couple of different avenues. That money has really not hit the street yet, but that is not millions of dollars or hundreds of millions. That's billions of dollars just in the state of North Carolina for water and wastewater improvements. On top of that, forthcoming in the next year or so, we'll start seeing the bipartisan infrastructure law money, which is, again, billions of dollars just in North Carolina, funneled through those same avenues in the state. I say all that to say there's a lot of money in the state of North Carolina for water and wastewater projects that has not traditionally been here. What that has done is created an extremely high demand for our contractor resource, equipment, materials. It makes it very expensive to do business right now, whether I'm trying to buy a piece of equipment, get a contractor to do work, buy components, meters, pumps, pipes, anything that has to do with our water and wastewater infrastructure. The cost is continuing to escalate, and the driver behind most of it is all this money kind of being dumped into the system. Put it in perspective, a sewer, we just got some prices on a small sewer lining project on MLK by the Pizza Hut. Something that would have cost us $80 a foot to line a section of pipe 2 or 3 years ago. The cheapest price we're getting back in is in the $400 range. And we're seeing that with a lot of stuff. And quite frankly, the contractors are charging that much because they can. They're turning down more work. There's more work than they can do. They're turning it down left and right. They're picking what they want to do, and you're going to pay a premium to get contractors in here to do work. So I say, that's a lot to just say it's not a cheap time to do work in the water wastewater world. What complicates this more for New Bern is that we are not eligible for applying for those state-level ARPA funds or those bill funds. All that money in North Carolina, it gets funneled through a program that's administered by the Division of Water Infrastructure. And there's an application process. Through that, there's some financial statements that you have to certify, and because of that, we're just ineligible for applying for that. So during this time of the next, ideally this money's supposed to be spent by 26. I honestly don't see how they're going to do it, but for the next several years, while you've got an elevated construction cost, there's a lot of people that are kind of playing with house money. We're playing out of pocket, so just keep that in mind as well. Add on to that, we have several of our own internal projects in New Bern that are either ongoing now or will be initiated or be active in FY24. These are some big ticket items. In the little two-pager on the back that highlights some stuff in the water and wastewater funds, the top of both of those for water and sewer, I kind of give you, some cost numbers of what's allocated towards these projects for the years to come. So you've got our large sewer improvements project in James City that we've been working on, currently underway. That will wrap up this calendar year, but it'll be in FY24 when that wraps up. We're continuing to work on our James City highway improvement projects, utility relocations within DOT. We're under construction with Phase 1. As Charlie mentioned, they're just getting into the design phase for the second portion of that project, which is Thurman Road to the Havelock Bypass. Sometime in FY24, I'll probably have an agreement from NCDOT where we'll have to agree to pay our portion of those utility relocation costs for that section of the roadway improvements. Before FY24 is over, I'm anticipating getting the same type of information back from NCDOT for the Highway 43 connector and utility relocations that are required because of that project. Based on general statutes and the size of New Bern, anytime we're doing utility relocations with water or wastewater infrastructure that currently exists within the DOT rights-of-way, New Bern's required to provide a 25% contribution to that, to those works. So if it's a $10 million project, we've got to come up with $2.5 million to cover the cost. On top of that, we've got the Simmons Street Water and Sewer Rehabilitation Project. This is a local project the DOT is trying to get under construction in 25. So we'll likely be looking in the second half of FY24, looking at some utility relocation for that project. That's basically replacing all the underground infrastructure and resurfacing Simmons Street from the railroad tracks all the way down to Trent Road. We have quite a bit of water and wastewater infrastructure in that, most notably a very large water main. We have 12-inch asbestos cement water main in there. It's caused us some trouble over the last few years, and that's one we really like to get replaced, and certainly replaced before they do any repaving work. Then we have our Northwest Interceptor Rehabilitation Project, phases 2 and 3. Phase 2, we actually opened bids Thursday of this week, so I have a pretty good idea of what that's going to cost. If everything goes well, we'd hope to have Phase 3 out for bid by the second half of FY24 and in construction as well. This is essentially doing some inside lining, some cured-in-place pipe lining of a very large sewer outfall. It's a 36-inch outfall that carries about a third of the sewer from New Bern, from the western half of New Bern to the treatment plant. It runs through some very swampy areas. It's a very old piece of infrastructure. It's made out of concrete. It's got some high deterioration in certain places due to some hydrogen sulfide cast corrosion over the years. So this is one we really want to make sure we have nailed down. We're not going to have any surprises from for years to come. And lastly on the list there, I have the West New Bern Water System Improvements, which is a large-scale water system improvement project on the western side of town. Essentially creates a loop between two dead ends of the water system, provides the capacity we need for the current growth and development over there, for the domestic supply as well as firefighting supply for the years to come. We've talked about this project quite a bit over the last 4 or 5 years. It's currently in the permitting phase. We hope to get it out for bid by the end of the summer and get somebody under contract by the end of the calendar year, but about midway through FY24. So that's a lot there. There's a little more information in the back of the packet in those little one-pagers, but we've got a lot of capital projects coming up. All the cost estimates we've done for those projects in the last 2 or 3 years, you can kind of take those and throw them out the window at this point based on what we're seeing with prices coming back in. So we'll take these one at a time as we get to them, as we address them, but the cost of what we thought these projects were going to be a year and a half or 2 years ago based on good data, they're probably going to be substantially more than that due to the cost escalations we're seeing from all the drivers mentioned above. So that's a lot to take in, and it's none of that's really great news. So I can get to the next slide.
If it's not anything better than this, just skip it.
It actually gets a little better next slide. That's why I'm eager to get there. The old-fashioned way, I guess. A message from IT. All right. This slide's a little better, Mayor. So this is some good news. So this is what we'd like to see in the utility world, so like we see as a utility manager. These are our growth trends for water and sewer customers over the last decade or so. And what I really want you to pay attention to, the areas I have circled in red. What you got there is a very consistent, steady growth in customer base of about 2 to 2.5% in both the water and sewer customer base over the last, over the last 7 or 8 years. That doesn't look like it's slowing down. And talking to the development community, the development world, it looks like we're on track to continue, growing the customer base at a fairly steady 2 to 2.5% in the years to come. That's good news. A lot of times that can get flatlined, that can go the wrong direction for various reasons. We're very fortunate that we're growing as a utility. Our customer base is growing. Another good news, if I look at revenue trends over kind of the same period of time, you'll see, again, draw your attention to the areas circled in red. Our revenues are continuing to grow kind of in parallel with the customer growth. That's great news. We're adding customers, we're adding revenue. These are all good things. The money we need to operate is growing every year as the expense is growing. That all sounds great. So from FY20 to 24, our revenue increased about 10.8%, and our sewer revenue increased about 7.8%. So in that 4-year span, we did a pretty good job of adding customers, and that helped offset some of those cost increases from labor, equipment, materials, everything that goes into running a utility. Unfortunately, the very last line at the bottom, you'll see there that the expense over the same time period has grown at a much faster rate. So where we grew almost 11% in revenue, we grew 26% in expense. In the sewer, about the same. We grew almost 8% in revenue. We grew 24% in expense. And most of that really is in the last 3 years. We have seen an exponential, cost increases in a lot of things. And really our big ticket items are what are hitting us the harder. Our treatment chemicals, our pumps, our brass fittings, things that are typically very expensive in our operation. Those are the things we're seeing the highest increase in. So it's really hitting us hard. So next, give you just kind of an overview of where we're trending in general with the water. This is just looking at our water fund. This is expense and revenue trends over the last 7 or 8 years. And as you can see, the top graph there is all of our cost expense centers, if you will, in the water fund. You've got water treatment, distribution maintenance, admin, debt, shared service, and interfund transfers and transfer supports. You kind of look from left to right across that chart, you'll notice all of those boxes continue to get a little bigger every year. Really, the only one that is kind of getting smaller and providing us any relief is our water fund debt. We have had some debt roll off. We've got a significant portion that's rolling off this year that helps a little bit, but that's not quite enough to get us there. Below that, you'll see our water fund cash on hand trends. So what I've tried to do there is paint the picture for you since 2018, where we've trended with what the minimum level should be and where the cash on hand has been. As you can see, the blue line is where the cash is. The red line is where you want to be. We've had a fairly comfortable balance above the red line. We've been doing pretty good at maintaining a cash balance above the minimum. That balance has shrunk a little bit in the last couple of years, and we have several large capital projects forthcoming in FY24. So just 2 of them I talked about, the West New Bern Water Project and the Simmons Street. West New Bern Water Project, our last estimate was $4.5 million. Simmons Street was $1.5 million. So just those 2 projects alone is a $6 million hit. We can do different things there. We can look at debt options. We can look at fund balance options. But that gap currently between cash on hand and minimum level is about $2.3 million. So we've got a buffer there, but it's not a buffer that's going to absorb all of our capital needs moving forward. So next, very similar in the sewer fund, the same type of graph. At the top, we show our expense centers over the last 7 or 8 years. Very similar, our operation division, you see those boxes getting larger every year. You will notice one big change in FY '24, that purple box, the debt, actually gets quite small. We have a lot of debt rolling off this year that really does help, but still doesn't get you there. Again, at the bottom of this page, you'll see the cash on hand trend. And you'll see there we basically, those lines are flocked. We actually, our available cash on hand is riding just below the minimum level and has been for several years. We don't see that really changing anytime soon. We're right at the minimum, and so for FY '24 and beyond, we need to make efforts to make sure we're not drawing that fund balance down any. And if we can, we need to make sure we need to make efforts to put a little bit to that to get back to that minimum level.
Jordan, either for you or Kim, I think I asked this last year, so you may have to just remind me. When we establish our days cash on hand for each utility, what was the logic in creating that?
There's a pretty good summary. It's about 4 or 5 pages that Mr. Biachetti did when he established that. It gives the methodology behind it. There's 4 or 5 key points that he's trying to highlight there. Emergency operations was one of the top priorities, but 4 or 5 key. I actually found that looking through some old budget books this week. I'll grab that and send it to Kim so she can distribute that back in case anybody's seen it. But it was a very concise summary, about 5 or 6 pages, when he established this in 2015 of what the methodology was behind the numbers that came into the water, sewer, and electric days of cash on hand.
Thank you.
So now, if you will, if you turn your attention to the 2-page summary I've kind of provided in the back, and down towards the very bottom, we'll start on page 1 at the very bottom. The top is basically just going through some summaries of the different funds and kind of highlighted some changes in each division as you go through the water fund. At the bottom of page 1, you'll see the second bullet from the bottom with current revenue projections. Water fund is underfunded by about $482,000 is where we show. Couple options for addressing that in FY '24. We can simply pull from fund balance. As you can see, that's going to further lower that level. We have a little bit of fund balance to play with in the water fund, but these are going to be reoccurring costs. There's not a lot of one-time cost in here that's going to shape that we can pay down from the water fund this year that you won't have next year. Looking at our CIP over the next 5 years, our capital investment in the water and sewer funds is going to be very similar over the next 5 years. So there's not many one-offs where you can just make a single contribution from the fund balance 1 year and kind of erase a deficit. You're going to see these same numbers continuing. One of the bigger changes we have seen this year in the operational costs, there's about a $300,000 increase in our water meter costs. And what that is we're far enough along in our AMI project that our water AMI infrastructure, we're going through replacement of the nodes. So the little communication device that hooks to meter that communicates back, it's a little potted device, got a battery, it's got a shelf, it's got a lifespan. Once it's done, it's done. You have to replace that. We're starting to get in our first phases of replacing those AMI nodes. And with that, we're kind of looking at what a long-term plan would be, and we're going to have to replace about 1,800 of those a year. We have 18,000 customers. They have about a 10-year life. That's the best-case scenario. We're seeing some of these first-generation ones not quite make it that far. The newer models we're replacing them with seem to be having better luck with. They've got a better warranty. We should get at least that 10 years out. So what I'm recommending at the bottom there, you'll see at the very bottom some proposed rate and fee increases, is a new fee this year. It's a water meter equipment fee. It's $1.67 a month, and basically what that is, these nodes should last 10 years. It's 120 months. They're $200 a piece. It basically takes $200, divides it by 120 months. That's the replacement cost. So basically just passing that direct cost along to each customer instead of a percentage and rate increase where the more you use, the more you pay. This number really is the same for every customer. Every node's the same in every meter. You want to make this as equitable as possible. So I'm recommending that as an adder to the water rate ordinance this year. If approved, that will generate $360,000 approximately of new revenue and come very close to erasing that additional expense in the water treatment department this year. That helps a lot in decreasing the budget deficit. The other two proposed fee increases you see there, and you'll see these both in water and wastewater. In 2018, the North Carolina legislature passed some general statute changes that made uniform calculations for every water and wastewater provider across the state and how we assess what used to be called TAP fees. They're now all called system development fees, and there's a very strict methodology of how they're calculated. Everybody in the state went through the process in 2018. We calculated the fees. We established system development fees and connection fees. With that, general statute also requires us to update the analysis and update those fees on every 5 years. So this July, we're due for an update of the analysis that calculates those fees as well as updating the fees themselves. We've got the analysis completed at this point. It's actually posted on our website now. It's a very lengthy public review comment. It's 45 days posted on our website where we can take comments. After that, we have a public hearing where we can take comment. And then after that, we can actually make some recommendations for you for what those look like. But we're looking at about a 7% increase based on the calculation methodology they have to use in the system development fee. And the connection fees across the board will also increase to represent what our material costs are today. So we established those in 2018 based on the material cost to install a meter or make a new sewer connection. Those material costs are substantially different today than they were in 2018. So what we're trying to do, we're basically losing money, substantial money, every time we make a connection today. So what we're doing is just bringing those up to current pricing. And you'll see those come back before you. These aren't included in our annual budget. They're not included in the schedule of fees. All of our water and sewer rates, our system development fees and capital recovery fees are all established in separate ordinances that aren't tied to the budget. So what we'll do at some point over the next 2 months, we'll bring back before you recommendations for restating the schedule of fees for water and wastewater rates, as well as restating the system development and connection fee schedules. Separate ordinances. That's why if you thumb through the budget book, you're not going to see system development fee, connection fee. You're not going to see water and sewer rates. They're not in the schedule of fees. They're established by separate ordinances. Like the rates are the same way.
So from the budgetary standpoint, are you recommending to pull from fund balance to balance the budget for this year?
I am not. I am recommending we go ahead and implement this new meter fee.
So maybe I'm confused. So the water section that's in this proposed budget, is it balanced?
It is balanced right now with a contribution, and there will, this is I think a very fluid budget at this point. We're making some changes even just yesterday morning, discussing some things. In the budget, just so you have a balanced document in front of you, you will see a large transfer from the water fund and the sewer fund, just so you have a balanced number in front of you. I think the message I'm trying to get across is it's unhealthy to probably take those fund balance reductions right now. We need to look at other ways to bring that revenue in. So good news. So that's a lot to take in, and the mayor likes good news. So good news. Even adding the $1.67 a month charge to the water bill, the ratepayers of City of New Bern and the customers of the City of New Bern water system still paying lower rates than you would have in 2011. So a little good news. I told you in 2023 you could pay less for service than you did in 2011. You'd probably take that across the board with anything in your personal life. I know I would. Anything I bought at a house or bought for business could be done at 2011 rates, I'd jump on top of that right now. And lastly, on the second page of the little 2-page handout, at the very bottom, very similar situation with the sewer fund. You see there, currently, I think what's in the budget book you're looking at, we have about a $580,000 deficit. We're going to help out a little bit of that with the system development fee and the connection fee increases, but you're still going to be substantially less than where you need to be. And we're already below the minimum fund balance. We don't need to look at additional fund balance reductions. So what I'm recommending is across-the-board user rate increase of 4.5%, generate a little over $500,000. At the very bottom there, you see the total revenue that will generate. As you can see, that's a little bit more than the fund balance deficit, and if everything plays out and everything balances perfectly, that would be great. No more cost increase surprises, and we can put a little money back in fund, I say a little money, about $50,000 back in fund balance, and help try to get that number back to the minimum.
Jordan, is our out-of-city limits rate still double what in-city rate is?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
There's currently some legislation bouncing around that may impact that. Not going to sound the alarm on that yet until there's a reason to. I don't know if it will. I don't know if that will make it through. But there is some legislation running through both House and Senate in North Carolina right now that would cap that percentage of what you could charge for out-of-city customers. We currently charge double. That's the way it has historically been in New Bern. Our rates are set on our out-of-city customers paying double. It would, we'd have to do a lot of legwork to continue that rate structure if it was even possible, depending on which bill passes and gets approved and signed into law. But a long way from that happening. If that happens, I'll come back to you and brief you on that. That wouldn't be a substantial impact, because most of our out-of-city customers are covered under some type of other agreement that it's not really the full double rate. It's a percentage of that. Could be an additional challenge. So more of the lines of good news with the 4.5% rate, this will bring our sewer rates across the board back to the exact same levels they were in 2011. So, I mean, we took some rate reductions several years ago, tried to pass along as much savings as we could to customers for as long as we can. Unfortunately, we've kind of run out of the ability to do that.
Any questions for Jordan on that? Any comments anyone has at this time?
I'll just remind the board, anytime you want to take a break, a motion and a second will do it.
So moved.
For how long? Better put a time on it. 10 minutes?
At least.
All right. Motion to take at least a 10-minute break. Got a second? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're in recess.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank y'all.
Okay, we are back. Mr. Manager, where are we?
Okay, if we are going to go into the budget on enterprise funds, so if everyone would turn to the water fund tab, which is page 151, it's close to the back of your handbook. Jordan, you did a very good job of going over a lot of things, so we're going to touch base on some things on the enterprise funds. And so on page 151, so with each department in this budget, you will see a cover page that has the budget highlights, the purpose and the department mission, and some general goals and objectives. So on page 152, you'll also see some key operations and functions. So in water resources, there are 3 divisions: the administration, water treatment, and water distribution maintenance. Then you'll see some successes and accomplishments and their goals for planning ahead, as Jordan covered with you previously. On page 153, you'll see the capital expenses that we are recommending. And so I talked about those previously. So for the water, that's $683,000. On page 154, this is where you're going to have to take your book and turn it to the right. It'll be easier to look at it like this. So there's a royal blue line at the very top. It basically says accounts to the left. To the far right, you'll see a percentage change. Beside that, you'll see managers recommended. So on this area right here, this is the revenues, anticipated revenues. So anticipated revenues for water is $12,733,102. And how do we arrive at that amount? Well, that's when we're looking at sales and services. And so it's broken down, basic customer service, capital recovery fees, connection fees, and on and on. That gives you an example of how we get to that $12 million in anticipated revenue. On page 155, you'll see the fund balance appropriation, and that's what Jordan had talked about earlier. So to have this budget balance, we're looking at appropriating currently $483,000 from the fund balance to balance this. On page 156, now we're going to look at each division on the expenditures. And so you see that top blue line again, then there's a lighter shade of blue right below that. So on page 156, you'll see the Water Resources Administration. Over again to the far right, you'll see the manager's recommended amount. And in Water Resources Administration, we're looking at personnel services and fringe benefits, so it's salaries at fringe, and then professional services, any current obligations. And some of those current obligations can include employee travel and training, advertising, any type of other miscellaneous fees. Then we've got some fixed charges, such as if we've got any leases going on, the amount we're paying for lease, any dues and subscriptions. Then supplies and materials, and it's a variety of things with that. It could include uniforms, community engagement, fuel charges, etc. So in Water Resources Administration, that recommended proposed budget is $938,315. In the next division, and this is on page 159, and what you'll see as you go through this, every division is going to always start off with personnel services, fringe benefits, professional services, current obligations, fixed charges. It's consistent throughout. In the Water Treatment Division, the proposed budget is $3,464,559.
Can we ask questions now?
Absolutely.
Back on page 157, under line item 74, community engagement, what's $10,000 for?
So we decided to break this out. As some of you may be aware, the electric utility, water resources, and several departments in the general fund, they do a lot of public engagement. And so that could include setting up at fairs and events and things like that. So that's to cover some of those costs. And if Jordan is here, he can explain what he anticipates some of those costs including.
Yes, sir, Alderman Asher. That's basically a new line item. You'll see it in all three of the utility funds this year. This is for, all the stuff that goes into setting up booths at MumFest. We do a lot of career job fairs trying to recruit staff. It's things of that nature. So it's just we've been pulling that money from weird office supplies, miscellaneous other supplies, trying to pull the funding for those things. So we've created a unique line item just to capture those this year.
Thanks.
And Foster, just as a general question, since it's the first time we're looking at salaries.
Yes, sir.
So this includes the wage increase we did in December. Does it include a wage increase that we committed to?
Yes, sir. This includes the first phase of the salary study. This is also including the second phase of the salary study and the proposed merit and COLA. And so we'll be talking about all of that toward the
Right.
end. So yes, sir, it includes everything.
Foster,
Yes, sir.
just before the new board came on, the last board that was before, it was supposed to be a discussion about a pay raise for the board, and it never been brought up. So I don't know where the board is on that discussion.
So I think the best time for that is going to be coming up shortly when we get to the general fund, because governing board will be the first thing. So we'll be getting there very soon.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So on page 159, this is the next division in water, and that's water treatment. Proposed budget is $3,464,559. On page 163, the next division is water distribution maintenance. Proposed budget is $3,310,859. On page 167, what you will see is all of the debt service for that department. And that amount for this year is $2,318,936. If you have questions about any of these, staff's happy to go into detail with you on that.
Jordan, under the, I reckon it was the chemical line item where it was 390,000, now it's 560,000, that's just the inflation of the chemical?
Yes, sir, I'll answer that is just the increases we expect to see in chemical costs. We are rebidding that. We have bids going, we'll receive bids at the end of May. We have worked with our current vendors and the chemical supply industry to adjust our contract terms to be as favorable as possible to get the lowest rates as possible. So we'll see what happens with that. Those numbers are based on our current rates, and quite frankly, at this point, I'm just hoping they don't go up. So we'll see at the end of May. We'll know exactly what that looks like, but that's one of those things that has increased substantially in the last 2 or 3 years.
Cost of doing business, right?
Yes, sir.
On page 168, what you'll see is reimbursement of services provided. And this breaks it down to the amount of funds that the water fund transfers into the general fund for services provided to the water fund. And so it's broken down by the governing board, all the way down through purchasing and warehouse, information technology, general and administration, accounting, insurance, legal, public buildings, etc. So that is paid to the general fund. That amount is $2,362,577.
Temporary help services, $65,000. I mean, is that, can we not hire somebody, or you just can't find anybody to hire?
Well, across the board, we have issues with being able to get employees, and at times it's easier for us to get temporary employees in all of the departments to help fill that need on a quick basis.
65, how many people are we talking about hiring? This is on page 164. Oh, I'm sorry.
Alderman Master, in both the water and sewer fund, we run probably 5 to 8 temporary employees on any given day. We would love to hire full-time employees and love to have those positions filled permanently. We're struggling to get applicants. The temporary help agencies are really a lifeboat for us to keep our head above water in the labor pool, and they've done a real good job. About half the ones that we route through, we do get a chance to vet those, and some of those become very good long-term employees for us. Other ones move on to do other things. It's not quite their cup of tea, so they move on and they don't last very long with us. But yeah, we have a healthy temporary services budget because we have trouble keeping permanent, hiring full-time permanent staff.
Several years ago, I don't remember how long, but there was a pretty intensive evaluation done on, I'm on page 168. I call them corporate allocations because that's what I deal with every day. But there was a lot of work that went behind the scenes to make sure that these percentages were equitable. And I see that some of these are vastly different. So did we reevaluate that?
So I'll let the finance director answer that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, so like on page 168 for IT, 22 actuals were 294,000. The current year revised budget is 387, and we're recommending 177. So that's a pretty substantial difference. So what in allocations percentage-wise changed with IT in these departments?
Sure, so a couple of things that we did different is we charged the enterprise funds for their specific contracts instead of running it through general fund that were IT related. So we made some of those changes. We did, overall, we did an evaluation of the cost allocation plan and updated it accordingly. There's a lot of work, and we actually worked very hard with all the department heads to make sure that we had a reasonable allocation. It's all justified and ran based on whether it's by employee, number of employees, number of square feet, just depending on the services, number of users. So that's pretty much the change that you see, and it's based on the prior year budget. But I'm gonna ask Tanya if she has anything else to add, because she is on the board.
That big drop was, for IT was moving those contracts.
So same thing with utility business office, it went up 24%, so the same thing based off of the new evaluation?
Yes.
Yep, and then UBO, the CAPS and SS accounting, which is shared service accounting, those are transfers to the electric fund, not to the general fund. So utility business office, SS accounting, and CAPS, if you look at those three lines, those ones, it's an expense here, but the revenue goes into electric for those three. The rest of them go to general fund.
Because the electric department is running the CAPS office now, is that why?
That's correct.
Which three were those again?
Utility business office, the shared service accounting, which
It's on
is
page 168,
Yep.
by the way.
SSA accounting, and CAPS.
All right.
And that's because that's our utility bills and water, sewer, electric are on that same bill.
Any questions on that?
I'd also add that, if you're looking at that fiber is new, you see a line item there for shared service for fiber. That's historically all been absorbed by the electric utility, and we tried to work on that. It's not there.
No, it's not there.
It's not.
Sorry.
So you said this is a change with who's providing the services with the CAPS and the utilities and so forth. Did you say this was something new this year or under this umbrella?
No, so what's new this year is specifically related to the question on IT and the second line there, information technology. It dropped significantly. And the reason being for that drop is because there were enterprise funds contracts that were charged to the general fund IT. And then we allocated them out. Well, we weren't really truly capturing those expenses in the enterprise funds. They were not an expense for the general fund. So we made that change and directly charged the appropriate funds for those specific contracts. Then the rest of it, the other new piece to this is that we just did an overall review of the cost allocation plan, because the last time it was done was, I want to say in 2014 or 15, and it just needed another look at it because we have grown. The base numbers changed, or the base calculation changed. So what they had proposed for that year and those following years, we couldn't justify were accurate. So we took a look at it, and some change, some fluctuations happened. So that's the new piece to it, but it's all based on the prior year, right? The prior year expenses, in order to get the and then the percentage is based on the prior year expenses, and so that's how we get to the amount that we need to budget for this year. Okay, so enterprise funds, just to kind of refresh your memory, those function as a business-like activity, and they should be able to self-support themselves, right? And then the general fund, that's where our tax income is coming in, and that we keep them very separate, and it's just, and they're, what do I want to say? They're very different funding sources. So you want the business like funds separate from the general fund. And you want also to make sure that they're all covering their own expense. And this references all of those shared services that the general fund provides that they need to cover their fair share for.
Thank you.
Okay, does that help you understand why we do this?
Actually, I had another question, but we'll stop there. Now, I was trying to understand what you were saying about caps and paying your utilities, and I thought you said you combine those under another umbrella now because...
No. So the enterprise funds covers water, sewer, and electric, and we have separate funds for each one of those in here. However, water, sewer, and electric all use the same services with UBO, caps, and the shared accounting, right? So in order for each of those funds to pay their fair share, that the electric fund bears the cost of that. So the water fund and the sewer fund reimburse the electric fund for those costs, not the general fund.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Could you just clarify for me what the difference is in the UBO and caps? I thought UBO was renamed to caps.
It's one and the same, it's a branding.
I think 5 years ago, utility business office was at Fort Totten, and we separated those cost centers out of there. So metering and billing has moved locations, and we call them utility business operations. Still UBO, but utility business operations. Customer service and payments is at Fort Totten, and it's just all they do is customer service and payments. Before they were all blended together, we separated them into different divisions of cost accounting. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
So if you went into Munis and you pull the line item for utility business office, it's going to show all the expenses and all the transfers from all the different enterprise funds paying into that. Is that correct?
So I'm not sure if I understand your question, but under electric, the UBO division, you'll see all of their expenses. And then this line, under the shared services, you'll see the expense for water and sewer and solid waste. Will have that expense, and they're paying that into electric revenue for the fund transfers coming in.
All right, I'll try to ask it differently. So if I wanted to see all of the financial activities for the utility business office, you could give me a report that shows all the inflows and outflows for the UBO. and it would show which department it was coming from without having to look through every single department to see.
Yes,
If you
I can
us-
give you that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions on that?
Can I clarify? The UBO Division 9614 it is in the electric department, performs metering and billing, gets the bills out the door. All those costs come into the electric department. Then what's happening here is the electric department is being reimbursed from the water, wastewater, and solid waste for those services provided. Is that add any clarity to it?
Yeah, I realize that because you took that over a few years ago.
Correct. So if I'm requisitioning something from that department, I don't split that requisition between all the funds at that time.
Right.
I just completely absorb it in the electric budget, and then we do this cost allocation, so the electric department is trued up on those shared services.
So prior to that change, was it in finance?
Yes,
It was.
Okay,
yes.
which was the general fund.
That's correct.
Okay.
Clear as mud?
It was before me.
And not to be convoluted, but you see that on page 195, which is the revenues for the electric department, interdepartmental transfers?
Right.
Okay.
So that is the revenue coming back into the electric fund for those various ones, not just specifically
Yeah.
caps, but. for the
But all
other-
three.
Yeah, yeah. Sure. So, 169?
Yeah.
169, that has $337,856 from the water fund to the general fund for pilot, which is the payment in lieu of taxes. And that is a calculation that we, general statute gives you two different ways you could calculate it. You could do, no, sorry. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, I'm doing both at the same time. That's the next slide. Okay. So this is the tax rate on their assets. So you take their total assets and you calculate the 4,822, and you get the 337,856.
Who is it being deferred to in the corner that I don't see?
Oh, this is Tanya. This is our budget and accountant, so she's worked heavily on this budget, and some of these calculations she does, so that's why I'm deferring to her as
The
well.
name again?
Her name is Tanya.
Tanya.
Tanya Harms.
Thank you.
Any questions? Okay.
Any questions on that?
All right, so sewer fund on page 172.
Let's go back to 170 real
Yeah,
quick.
I was gonna
Okay,
ask the very
170.
same question.
All right.
170.
Can somebody explain this one to me?
Customer tax.
There's zero on some of these.
Explain.
You want to take that one? Is there one more this year for $200,000? Jordan? Okay. Okay. Jordan, do you want to come up and explain?
So they're asking about,
Bad, the bad debt line item.
It had 200,000, and you asked us to remove that for this year.
That's a number that in the last couple of years has showed up as part of the accounting process. Finance director put that in, not sure what it's for, not sure what it was spent.
So I'm assuming bad debt is when someone doesn't pay their bill and we write it off.
I think it came from the write-off. Some of those amounts were cleanup from old bills and maybe Jordan, the 2020 COVID, that was sort of before.
Honestly, I have no, I wish I had a better explanation. That's something that showed up, a couple budgets ago. I never really got a clear explanation from the previous finance director what that was for. I don't see where I think we've expensed that or done anything with it. So yeah, as preparing the budget this year, I see no reason to account for it again. I don't know.
Well, there's nothing recommended.
No.
But there's, the actual is 16,000, but the revised budget's 200,000.
I will look into that. I'm not really, I honestly,
So where in the budget is bad debt being captured for any of the utilities? Because there's obviously bad debt.
so, in 2022, I believe, if I remember correctly, we did that when we did the final budget amendment. And they had $16,670. I will have to dig in to figure out why we have $200,000 in a revised budget for this year. I think that would have been, it says revised, but I'm thinking we probably started off with that as an original.
There's a
Which
possibility.
carried over from the prior years as well. So my guess is what I would, without going in there and looking, is that we had $200,000. The director, Mary Hogan, had put in some higher budget amounts in there a couple years back. And then when we do the final budget amendment, we bring it down to what the actual is, which is that in 2022 was $16,600. So when you do the budget, it typically carries over.
And I see none of that bad debt expense under that heading for the electric department.
Page 219, 29,000.
So if we have that, we would do that through the final budget amendment, is what I'm trying to say, typically.
And page 189 for the sewer, that's 7,000.
Connie, do you have any history? We can look into it and I can follow up with an email with you.
I mean, obviously, we've got to be capturing the bad debt write-off somewhere. It's just not in that particular category or line item, I'm assuming.
Mayor, I think historically it was just done as a year-end true up of the fund. Historically, we didn't show anything as a anticipated line item for that. And you would historically just true that up at the end of the year along with contributions back to fund balance or deductions to fund balance to balance everything out for the year in a year-end budget amendment. I think the previous finance director was trying to show that, understand there would possibly be some exposure there. She was trying to show something. It was kind of a one-off that never really got traction, I think, in how to budget for that or why the numbers were what they were.
And I guess to say when I do it when we did it at the final budget amendment, if it's got, when we're putting money back into fund balance, it means we have remaining budgets at the in some areas, and these are small enough that it offsets those without having to take away, without having the budget for it. It just kind of goes off of the top of what we're putting back into fund balance. They're small amounts, very small amounts.
Any other questions on water fund? All right, page 172, sewer fund. Again, on this page, you'll see budget highlights, which Jordan has previously covered, purpose and mission, and the general goals and objectives that they'd like to accomplish in this budget. So there are two divisions in the sewer department, and that is sewer treatment and sewer system maintenance. Then you'll see some information about some successes and accomplishments, and then their goals for planning ahead. On page 174, you'll see the proposed capital expense items, totaling the amount of $1.4 million. Then on page 175, anticipated revenues, $13,461,244. And again, the line items you see below that are anticipated revenues and how we're going to arrive at that $13 million number. On page 177, in the sewer treatment division.
Hey, Foster, back on 175. We've got, and I guess this goes for everything, the 2023 actuals, is that annualized or is that year-to-date? And if it's year-to-date, through when?
It's year-to-date as of yesterday, a couple days ago.
Through April?
Yes.
Okay. Just curious, like, for, I guess I may have just answered my question. On the basic customer service, our current year revised budget, we don't know how we're trending toward that without doing the calculation, but it looks like we're recommending that we're going to be down in revenue in sewer. Is that based off of how we're trending through April? Because the chart that we just saw, everything was going up. So I was anticipating an increase in our revenue.
Everything that's in the budget, Mayor, it does not include any of the recommended costing, the rate increases. So what you're looking at in the budget will have, at the end of the day, you'll see a transfer to fund balance, or from fund balance to cover the deficit in both the water and the sewer fund. So we're not capturing those increases in costs and revenue. We have a revenue projection model that we use based on monthly consumption for the last 10 years. We update that every month, and that's what we use to generate the revenue projection numbers. Some of these numbers have been down in sewer, so you're going to see it spits out a lower annual basic customer service. One of the largest drivers in that is one of our industrial customers. We've had a couple of dry years. One of our largest sewer customers is an industrial customer. It's actually the landfill. We treat their leachate. What drains down to the bottom of the landfill goes to some lagoons. It gets aerated and evaporated. What doesn't evaporate, they pump to us. It's normally a considerable amount. Like I said, they're like our number 2 sewer customer. For the last 9 months, they've sent 0 to us because it's been dry. The rain hasn't been there. They've been able to evaporate all their leachate. So because of that, you put all that into the projection model, it spits out a little lower number for annual basic customer service than it did last year. So, and the model is built a little conservative to make sure we're not over budgeting in revenue.
Okay, thank you.
On page 177, sewer treatment. Estimated expenditures for that division, $4,497,383. That does include salaries and benefits, professional services, again, the current obligations, fixed charges, supplies and materials. On page 181, you'll see information on the sewer collection system maintenance division. Proposed budget is $5,087,452. On page 186, expenses for debt service are projected to be $102,559. Reimbursement to the general fund on page 187 for shared services, anticipated to be $2,768,877. And our payment in lieu of taxes to the general fund, $1,004,973. That's on page 188. So let us know if you have any questions on anything in the sewer fund.
So for comparison, like page 169 and 188, transfer to other funds, there's no recommendation for water to be transferred, but there's $500,000 for sewer.
The $500,000 to transfer to other funds.
Yes.
I believe that's to a project fund, Jordan, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Any other questions on sewer? All right, page 199, the electric fund. So again, the highlight, you'll see the highlights of this year's proposed budget, their purpose and mission. So the electric utilities is broken into several different divisions that includes administration, power supply, distribution, communications control, utility business operations, and customer and payment services. On page 193, proposed capital items are $2 million, and we've gone through that list previously. Estimated revenues for the electric utility on page 194, anticipated to be $60,954,792.
So on the basic customer service for electric, 2023 actuals through April is $39 million. I know there's seasonality because we're probably going to have more in May and June than we would, but I don't know, maybe the heat balances out in the winter, but if you extrapolate it out, we're projected to do $47 million for the full year in basic customer service, but we're recommending a budget of 55, and the current year is 55.
I can't see what you're looking at.
Charlie.
Page 194, maybe you use the same revenue model that Jordan uses, and it's extremely conservative, but this is very conservative.
So I do also want to let you know when you're looking at the actuals, we're always a month or more behind, right? So the bills go out.
So it's through 9 months.
So this revenue would be, for, I would say 8.5 months, 8 to 8.5.
So really, just for future reference, the 2023 actuals or the current year actuals when we're looking at the budget is pointless. There's no point in having it in there. Unless,
I thought the actuals was calculated on through the end of June.
It's what's posted as of that date, but we always take the revenue that we build out from June. That comes in July, in mid-August. So we need to post that back at that point. So we're already a month and a half behind. So when you're looking at bills, billed revenue. And then to top that off, it has to get through the cycle. Right now, we're dealing with at least a week behind, I think, about a week behind with an issue with the conversion.
So are all like regular services and stuff like that, is that all calculated through the end of June? Or is it also 8.5, 9 months?
When you're looking at this, it depends on what it is, but the bills to customers and that you're looking at for enterprise funds, it's,
Well, I wasn't necessarily referring to the enterprise fund. My question is,
sorry.
the current year revised budget,
Mm-hmm.
let's just take the police department. They have a supply budget for ammunition. Is that revised budget based on the estimated cost through the end of this fiscal year?
Yeah, the budget is correct, yes. That's where we're at today.
Okay,
And then it's the 2023 actuals that I was referring to.
okay.
Yeah, I think that just really adds confusion, and there's not a lot of benefit for it being there. If it's gonna vary from department to department and line by
mean,
line,
Yeah, it really does, because your salaries and benefits are the same situation. You have about, a whole payroll at least that will go back. Sometimes there's a payroll and a half that'll go back. So when you look at salaries, you can't look at it as this point in time as well. There's still stuff that will get posted to the FY23 just because of.
so when you generate this book, do you have the ability to pick and choose what is pre-populated on this report?
Mm-hmm. It's got limits though, so we'd have to look to see if that's something we can pull out.
So is there, instead of the 2023 actual column, is there a way to put year-to-date percent to plan or percent to budget? Is that an option, do you know?
Nobody's asking about the percent. So we can hide the column 2023 actuals, okay? But to do the calculations, it comes over automatically, so that we can play with it, yes.
To me, I would rather not even see that, but if there is something that I could see, it would be beneficial to see what are we to year-to-date budget,
Okay.
maybe, depending on when that shows up. I don't know, you may look at it, and it may just be as wacky as the actual number is.
That would still be skewed if you have where you're at, where year-to-date. You would have to know which ones you still have.
Yeah,
a
so
lot.
just
Yeah.
don't even show it, and I think would be my recommendation. I don't know how
Okay.
everybody else feels about it, but.
So hide the 2023 actuals.
So does everybody understand why I brought that concern? So the 2023 actuals, depending on where they are in the accounting process, it could be all the way through the month of April, it could be halfway through March, it could be the beginning of March, so it's really hard to me, there's no benefit in having that there because you can't really calculate anything to see, so.
Well,
It's really on
is that,
all
are
of
you
them.
just talking about the enterprise funds or all other general fund as well?
It's all of them. It's typical because,
Well, sometimes the department head will show that he's overspent. The actual would be more than what the actual budget is. So, I mean, to me, the 23 actuals, that's what balances our budget for this year, right?
right, so when you look at a line item, a specific line item that has a over expenditure, let's say, over expenses are higher than what's budgeted, we have we have several accounts that we can group together, and in total, as long as it doesn't go over that group, for example, I'm gonna use
I understand the
supplies.
pools.
5 different
Take them off
supply
the pools.
items, right, within that division, and as long as it doesn't go over that pooled amount,
Sure.
then they can over budget that specific line.
Okay.
So that's why you see that.
But still, it don't make any difference to me. I mean, the actuals, I like seeing the actuals on there, because that's going to tell us exactly what each department's going to spend in that particular line item through the remainder of through the year.
I guess what I was saying though, if you're looking at it, if you look, let's look at an expense, so. If you look at personnel expense, for example,
What page are we on?
199. So if you're looking at salaries and wages, it's budgeted for 2.197, and they've actually spent 1.71. But the question is when is that through? So is that through the full month of April? Is it through the pay period that ended a week before April ended?
Right.
There's no way to take that number and then, because what I typically do, if you were to say that's through April, and it was through the end of April, you can take that number and divide that by 10, and then times it by 12, which would give you your full year annualized rate. And when I did that with all these other calculations, none of them added up. So that's the reason I was saying it wasn't beneficial to see it, because something doesn't match up.
I don't know. I don't mind looking at them because, some of them, like your same example, if you look at the line items down below that, I'm looking at overtime. Holy cow, they're paying, what is that, 67% more overtime and they're not even done with the year yet. I mean, so, those are the things that pulls out to me, not exactly, to the penny, but it's like, yeah, okay, that one's probably way over budget.
So Kim,
Yes.
when the budget is being prepared and, the 2023 actuals, you have these line items, it shows these line items. Is this something that is required by the auditors to be shown, or in your preparations, in your budget preparation?
I don't think that column is required. We have to,
Okay.
I'll double check, but it doesn't, I know that we have to show several years. We have to show history, right? So we
Okay.
have 2022 and 23 on this.
Okay.
For comparison purposes. I personally, I think it gives, if you look at it in a different lens, where you're looking at it in, a bigger picture of this is, I guess, with Alderman Brinson said, it makes sense, like we're already over, so is this enough? Where are the outliers? Instead of looking and validating the calculations, like where are the outliers and what should we be addressing? How come this is significantly high and under budget here? It could be because we had a significant expense and that's not gonna reoccur. But if you're using it for recalculation purposes, then you're not always gonna come in.
I mean, you leave it in there, I can just ignore it. I mean, I can look at it for certain things, like on page 200, the electric department has overspent their budget on current obligations. So are we gonna expect, well, you've got it covered, I guess, hopefully. Again, you're basing your recommended budget for this year off of what the spend is, right?
Not always.
Okay.
From last year, no, not always. It, again, depends on the category. So we do drill down in a lot of these numbers to look to see, and look at history to see what, if it's something that's reoccurring year after year, or if it's just happens to be something that was new that year, or, just one-time expense or recurring expense. So, yes, we use it as a guide and then kind of look at it in the big picture again to say where's the outliers, where are we maybe missing something, or are over budgeting, and then try to figure out why. Because sometimes there's one-time expenses coming this year as well. And I think that, Tanya, you can confirm this, the percent change that's all the way to the right, I believe that is revised budget in the recommended budget.
Yes, it's the revised, so it wasn't the original budget for this year, it's revised, which includes.
Yep. So your revised budget, we've made a lot of changes through the year, which also includes those road POs, which were quite significant this year because of not being able to get equipment and other capital.
Any other questions on the revenue parts of it? Page 196, electrical administration. Anticipated expenditures, $2,136,080. On page 199, distribution, operation, and maintenance. Recommending $8,718,454. Page 204, electric power production, $38,907,498. On page 207, communications control. Recommended budget is $829,498.
Hey, Kim, on page 202 for building structures and improvement line for 650, I'm gonna assume that's for Kell Road expansion.
Yep, and that's listed in your capital.
The numbers are different though. Kell Road expansion is 200,000 and it's 650 in that line item. But either way, whatever makes that line item up, is there a calculation somewhere in here to show that that would be financed? We're not trying to cover all of this capital outlay in this year's budget to make it balanced, are we?
Charlie, I don't think he put anything in there for, no, I think it's coming out of his fund balance. Did you put in proceeds from debt?
Were you planning to pay for your $2 million capital expenditure out of fund balance?
I wasn't planning to have debt service on any of the electric budget,
Yeah.
other than the debt service that we have existing.
Okay.
So we just covered 207, communications control, which is $829,498. On page 209, utility business office operations. Recommended budget is $2,851,861.
Mayor Odom, I don't know, if the 650 was not Kale Road expansion, that was the 200,000. The 650 was 400,000 for Old Town River Crossing System Improvement and 250,000 for Greenbrier System Improvement.
Okay, thank you.
page 213, customer and payment services. Recommended budget is $1,660,052. Page 216, the debt service line item for expenditures for this coming year, $986,080. On page 217, reimbursement of services to the general fund will be $1,760,660. $1,760,669. And on page 218, payment in lieu of taxes to the general fund, $3,104,596.
So the governing board allocation for the sewer department is the same amount as the electric department? Maybe the calculation was just divided by how many departments we have, because it's the same for the water.
Do you know we'll pull it up. We'll pull it up, see what it's calculated by.
Can you go back to 214?
We did, we gave you that amount for all three of these utilities.
Okay. So the enterprise funds was divided, for that governing board, was divided a third for, governing board.
What page were you asking that
For,
question?
for each enterprise fund.
217 is
Okay,
one of them.
217 was one of them.
Yeah, so the governing board allocation is split equally amongst electric, water, and sewer.
For the enterprise portion, yeah.
So on 218, I guess this would be customer and payment services. What's the S&M contracts? Like,
Service and maintenance?
yeah,
What
but I
page?
mean, yeah, I'm on 214. $358,000 for S&M contract under customer and payment services.
That's what I was gonna ask.
So,
Line item 73,210,
Yeah.
What page is that?
214.
Contracts with, related to their software upgrades. I have to pull up the details.
So the software upgrades that they're going through right now, it's some new contracts. She's gonna pull up the detail. Charlie, do you recall exactly what it is?
What you're talking about, but
Yeah.
I'm guessing those were the IT items that
We pulled.
were bundled in before under shared service and now put out and allocated across each division.
But you also had additional contracts this year for the UBL, right? For the conversion to Hanson?
No.
No.
Oh, that's in a different fund.
Okay.
There's a new contract for cash handling and safe services that may be showing up in that line item that you're looking at where, I don't want to give too many clues away how we handle cash, but
Well, you could just find that out and let us know, because that's a significant number.
Yeah, I'm just, it's going from 600 last year to 358,000 this year. That's
And I do
kind of what
believe
I'm.
it's what, those are those contracts that were pulled out of IT
Pulled out of IT, okay.
That's my,
So we have $260,000 for the Hanson CIS license and support. We have $600,000 for electronic security. Or, I'm sorry, $600. We had $30,000 for banner support, Micro Focus, COBOL, and then $30,000 for banner support, Oracle database, $35,000 for banner support, MAK Solutions, and $3,000 for soft docs. IT related.
Where are we now?
Still on page 214, they had a question on some of the service and maintenance contracts. The flag on that was, if you'll look on the bottom part of that, on the right-hand side, the percentage increase was 59,000%. That's what flagged it.
I think it would be helpful, some of these line items like this, if you grouped a bunch of stuff together, that you list out what's in that group. I mean, it would be easy to sit down there and under that $358,600 and say $300,000 for this, $200,000 for that, you know, just kind of like the itemized budget that the department heads send. You know, instead of leaving all these, at least what they used to send. It's been a long time since I had to do one, but anyway.
So to help you understand the process a little bit, we do send out we open up the budget and they enter their own budgets. And there are some areas where they do provide, that's mandatory to provide detail, and some areas that are not. And some of these, they chose to provide more detail. So if we were to print a budget that had with the detail like that, it would be probably 3 times as big as this. So we provide you these sheets right here with the long details of the training and the dues and subscriptions. That would also print within there, so we condense everything and give you a few pages so that you can see it by department. But if we were to print this with that level of detail, with the line spacing, we can't fix the spacing on this, it would be extremely large. You would have a very, very, very large book. And I mean, we'd probably have to send it out because I don't know that we'd have the capacity to do it on our current printers, to be honest with you.
Okay.
For this many.
Well, as long as you can pull the information up, just
Yes.
like you just did and provided it to us, it's
Yes.
fine with me.
But I think that also maybe in the highlights, we can pick some of those out next time and then have that readily available.
Yeah, those large over.
See if there are any other questions on the electric fund. If not, we'll be going to solid waste. Solid waste will start on page 221 when you're ready. All right, if everyone's ready, so on page 221, again, you'll see the budget highlights, the purpose, goals, objectives of solid waste. On page 222, you'll see the capital items, $275,000 in capital for that fund. On page 223, Anticipated revenues, $4,374.49. On page 224, you'll see the solid waste division. Proposed budget is $3,924,369. Debt service on page 227 is projected to be $62,021. On page 228, reimbursement of services to the general fund is projected to be $382,972. And on page 229, payment in lieu of taxes, $4,687. And of course, as George Childs was stating earlier, he'll be coming back at a future board meeting to discuss the anticipated increases in cost from GFL and landfill. Any questions on solid waste? All right, if you'll turn to page 232. So the Municipal Service District, MSD, anticipated revenues are $421,200. And you'll see a breakdown of where we come up with that on page 232. On page 233, MSD expenses are estimated to be $421,200. The majority of that comes from payments for projects that we have already approved, the general fund transfer to police,
General fund.
to general fund for police for the parking control. And miscellaneous city services such as maintenance staff cleaning the cub house and the fountain and things like that.
So Foster, there was conversation, has been, about MSD and an advisory committee and all of that. Clearly, we don't have time to establish that before we adopt this budget. So what are you proposing to garner input from the MSD taxpayers on how this money is going to be expended for this budget cycle?
So Alderman Trill has really been vocal about wanting to get input from all the participants within the MSD. So when he gets back, we are going to be scheduling a meeting, and it'll most likely be mid-May with all of the property owners within the MSD. We'll meet here at City Hall. When we had the last work session, we talked about the proposal for how an MSD committee could work. We're going to present that to those residents and property owners. We're going to get their input on what they could envision. With that piece, we're going to bring that back to the governing board again and discuss that. We're also going to talk about a variety of projects with the property owners. Some of those can be beautification, some of them will be a variety of enhancements, and we'll get their input on some projects they would like to see as well. We will bring that back to the governing board, get your input. If there are any other projects that come up, we'll rank those accordingly. Currently, we've got $1.6 million in that account, and we need to spend money on those projects. We need drop that balance down.
Kim, do you show what the debt service is for the MSD?
Yes.
That would be a quick way to pay some of it down. Do you have a list of projected projects for?
I don't have it here. We meet tomorrow.
But you, okay.
Yes, we've got several.
Okay.
Yes.
So MSD has a balance of $641,163 total.
And that's got some sort of interest rate. It's probably pretty low, but if we're sitting on 1.8 or 1.6 million.
1.6 million.
Sitting on 1.6 million, why wouldn't we just pay that off? That's what I would recommend. So we can get their input as well. And how are we gonna notify all the property owners?
We're gonna send a mailer out to them to let them know. We'll also do the traditional routes of communication with the downtown folks
Okay.
to let them know. So
Very good.
we'll, of course, we'll let the entire board know if you'd like to attend that meeting.
Okay.
So on your screens in front of you in the PowerPoint, the current MSD tax rate is $13.75. The tax valuation was $183.5 million as of April 6th. The revenue neutral rate is 11 cents. 1 cent on that tax rate equates to $18,350. Okay? No reason to raise that from revenue neutral based on the amount of funds we currently have in place and any future projects we have. The debt service, if we don't pay that off, we've got plenty to cover future projects. Any questions? All right, we've got several other funds. On page 236 is the redevelopment commission. Currently, there's 0 on the manager's recommended. Normally what will happen with that is that the redevelopment commission, during one of their board meetings, they will make recommendations on the amount of funds that they would like to allocate to the budget. So when they do that, we bring that to the governing board in the form of a budget amendment. So that will most likely come at some point in June or July, or if they think they've got a project coming up, if they want to spend money on a house or any other project that's not covered by any type of grant they currently have. So they've requested nothing so far for this upcoming budget.
So the executive director's salary came from?
That came from development services.
Okay.
Yes, that's funded in development services.
Will the ARP allocation that we approved Tuesday night show up in this redevelopment?
No,
fund? It won't?
nope, it's in general fund. Those dollars are in general fund.
So what did we do Tuesday night? I thought we allocated the money for the redevelopment commission.
Well, I'm sorry, can you refresh my memory on what projects?
So when, at the last meeting, Alderman Astor recommended, I believe it was $547,000 be allocated from his ARP allotment to core public housing for the redevelopment commission.
$547,000?
Yep. So that should
So,
be,
and that will have to come back to did you do anything for this budget for a budget amendment?
No, I didn't think it got passed or approved.
yeah, I think it was
Yes, it
5 to
did.
1.
Okay, my apologies, so you won't see that on the, okay. So I can, if it goes to redevelopment commission, we can do that and set it off in a project code. We can set, so that we can monitor it. And that's fine. If you want to give them the $547,000 as a grant, then that's a different conversation to have. But I have no problem moving it over there and just managing that to ensure, so basically the difference is we would pay those expenses and have control of that versus giving them $547,000 for them to spend and then have to send a report over.
The easiest way will be to set it up the way we previously allocated ARPA funds for the community center, the wellness center that the board allocated. I think it was $350,000 for
In the project.
previously, yes.
So you would just write a purchase order and do draws right off the purchase
Yeah.
order?
That's correct.
Yes.
And so if it comes in less than the 547, we just put the money back in ARP?
Correct.
Gotcha.
So we have a project fund for the Health and Wellness Center,
Established that, yeah.
the $350,000.
No, we have that still sitting in general fund.
So that,
And under the ARP, I mean, we have a separate project under there that's considered, that we're watching all of those funds and allocating it a project code. And then it's just rolling to the next year of whatever's unspent. So we were not anticipating on setting up projects for all of these and monitoring all these different projects. We were just gonna keep them within the general fund as indicated by, UNC, when, School of Government, when we reached out to them.
but there's still $350,000 allocated for it. It's just in a different
Absolutely.
bucket. Okay.
Yep.
And whenever they're ready to start, then,
It's going to be soon.
whenever they're ready,
Right.
then we'll work with them on the appropriate process for purchase orders and things like that.
So at the end of, in our final budget amendment this year, we'll have a large amount. It'll be the remaining ARPA funds that we will commit. And we will set those funds aside, and then we have all of those within the list that you'll receive. It's got a different code to it to separate all your projects based on your ward and your projects that you've assigned it.
Page 238. The MPO, the Municipal Planning Organization. So there are approximately 5 local governments that participate in this. City of New Bern, it's River Bend, Trent Woods, Craven County, and Bridgeton. And so our allocation for that is $27,227. Every other local entity contributes those funds as well, and they also get a grant from the state. So we basically house them in development services. We have 2 staff members that are employed by the city, but all those contributions go to pay that budget. And so revenues ends up being $245,375, and expenditures on 239 for the MPO is $245,375, and you see the breakdown. So all of that is covered.
And there's additional funding through this federal transit planning. So on page 240 is additional funding for MPO with the federal transit planning, and it's $54,072. There's part of that local match is the $6,008. That also is a federal grant, so.
On page 241, you'll see the emergency 911 fund. This year we have revenues of $156,353. On page 242, these fund the expenditures of the emergency 911 system in the amount of $156,353, and it includes a variety of things such as employee travel and training.
How many employees?
The 911, there are no employees in that. It's just a variety of contracts and things that meet the criteria for E911. It doesn't cover the telecommunications.
So my question is, the employee travel and training at $22,000, how many employees will be traveling and training for $22,000?
Tiny's gonna pull the detail. I believe it's in here though. If you go to page 16,
16?
in the front with all the travel and training details, you'll see their list of their training.
Does that answer the question?
Okay,
So we're gonna give you an example of what that training is.
so on page 16, travel and training budget, about halfway down, you've got emergency 911 support. And that is APCO training for dispatch and telecommunicators,
Just a
CTO.
minute, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Let me
that's
get
okay.
there.
What page is that again?
16.
16, okay, go ahead.
So about halfway down, you'll see emergency 911 support.
Right?
And that's the list of the training that they have, that they're scheduled to go to or they want to go to. And it's the APCO training for dispatch and telecommunicators, CTO training for telecommunicators, communications training officers, annual PSAP manager training, 911 civilian unit supervisors training with the North Carolina Justice Academy, and then APCO quality assurance training for the civilian unit supervisors. And that's covered under the E911. They get reimbursed for that. Okay.
How many telecommunicators do we have?
Chief, how many telecommunicators do we have?
I don't have my
Okay.
org chart in front of me, but roughly telecommunications about 12. That does not include the supervisors.
So with these trainings, the first one, there's 7, that covers 7 employees for a total of 14,000. So 7 employees times $2,000 to go to that APCO. And then the following 4, there's 3 each.
Okay.
Are these trainings mandated?
Several of the trainings are mandated, yes.
Just real quick, back on 239 and 240, I know we've got 2 employees in the MPO. Why are they separated? Is one salaried and one exempt, one non-exempt? Is that why they would be separated out?
No, it's the 2 different grants through, MPO is separated by 104F and 5303. So those are 2 separate pieces, so we just divide up their salaries, so.
So for example, on 239, the health insurance, the $25,000
That's for both.
for both? Okay. Thank you.
So on page 243, you've got the police special revenue. That proposed revenue is $21,940. And Kim, why don't you talk about the training that is used for that?
Okay, so the training listed in the police special revenue is investigative travel for the vice and narcotics detectives. And this you can find on page 16 again, but I'm reading it out. Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Conference, Narcotic Enforcement Officers Association Conference, miscellaneous training, it says for vice and narcotics detectives, basic narcotics course, drug law enforcement program, and it's with the Federal LE Training Center. We have undercover techniques course and annual game conference. In the police special revenue fund, it's instruction fees from classes that our officers provide the college. And so they in turn use that for additional training for their staff.
Fire department still do that as well? Training that's provided by that our employees do, and the community college pays for it, are y'all still no longer doing that?
I'm sorry, I thought you were asking them. Can you repeat
I
that?
was asking Bob, our chief boy. He answered.
Okay. Sorry. Are we ready to move on? Okay. 245?
245, yes.
Yep. So page 245 is the e-sharing DOJ. These funds are from cases that go to a federal level. The assets from the bust are sold. The city applies for our portion of those assets, and that's used for that revenue is then used for special investigations and travel and training as well, if needed. They have budgeted $36,050, and the expenses are $36,050 as well, with $6,050 in contracts and $30,000 in special investigations, which I think it's I don't know, police can give more information, but from what I understand, it's the funds they need to do their job for those busts.
If you want to, yeah.
I get it.
This is drug money, right?
Right, so
Yeah.
part of those asset forfeiture dollars goes towards buy bus monies that our undercover staff uses to actually purchase drugs to make criminal drug investigative cases.
Thanks, Chief.
And page 247 is also, it's Department of Treasury. It's the same thing for special investigations.
Question. Is our goal today to complete this, or
Yes.
we return tomorrow?
I think the plan is going to be to split this up and return tomorrow. 'Cause you've got a lot of information in front of you, and it's going to be up to you all how long you want to go. But I think some of you would like to review some of the things that we went over today, and that way if you have any questions overnight, then we can kind of look at those and tackle those. And of course, you're welcome to look at the general fund tonight as well to come prepared with any questions that you may have also. But it is a lot of information that we've gone over today, and we've got a lot more to go in the general fund. So. And we're just about finished with all of the other funds on this, and so.
Okay, so, and just to piggyback on that, if you have some questions, the sooner you if you wouldn't mind emailing them to us, we could work to get those answers so we're prepared, and that'll move along a little bit quicker as well tomorrow. Page 249 is the facade, or public-private partnerships, and that's the facade program. That's $10,000. It's a grant, community grant. There are, let me see. If you're not familiar with the facade, it's the New Bern's Facade Grant Program is designed to provide an economic incentive for owners and tenants of commercial property within the 5 Points Commercial Corridor and other distressed areas of the city identified by the Board of Aldermen, City Manager, and Development Services. Bless you.
Thank you.
So this program's been around since at least 2012, and on average, we'll allocate approximately $10,000 a year for that. And each year, we've had at least one or two businesses that have reached out to request this funding. Most recently, we've had Brewery 99 to receive some funding, and the new restaurant on
Cork.
Tapper.
Cork was received some funding as well. And
What page is
so,
that again?
250.
250.
So the next few pages, there's no budget being recommended, and it prints anyways because of the history, so that we have the balanced budget. So if you want to jump to page 259. $259 is our employee benefits fund. We're self-insured, and based on we've reached out and received calculations from our insurance company. They provided us an estimated budget, which has us at about $7,880,920, and that covers our workers' compensation as well as our health and dental insurance for retirees and employees. Do you have any questions on that? And that's all we have right now for other funds, so we would be ending the other funds at this time unless you have any other questions.
so are there any other questions on what we've gone over with the, everything we've covered today?
So we've covered all the enterprise funds and the special funds. And that took us 3 hours and 40 minutes, is that about right?
That's correct.
So the general fund includes more departments than the enterprise fund, so what's the pleasure of the board? We've lost 2.
Yeah, see, that's, we barely have a quorum.
I'm ready to stay a little while longer if y'all are, I don't care.
Is there any way, though, that we're gonna be able to wrap this up today? I don't think that's gonna be possible, so.
It would take a few more hours to go through this general fund.
I do have a question. Do you want to go over the department level or division level? Are you wanting to go line by line like this with the general fund? Or just pick out some of the bigger areas within each department?
I would suspect we're probably gonna have about the same format for the general fund. It's 441, like I said, we've lost 2. Plan was to come back at 1 o'clock again tomorrow. So what would you like to do, Alderman Astor?
I'm retired. I don't have anything to do, but I'm prepared to stay
Actually-
here a little longer if somebody wants to stay a little longer.
Actually, ironically, out of the 4 of us that's left, 3 of you are retired. So, and I'm on vacation technically today and tomorrow and Thursday.
So, I'm ready to stick around for a little bit longer if you want to start on to it, or if you want to just start back tomorrow afternoon, that's fine too.
Mr. Manager, what would you recommend if we wanted to work a little bit longer?
Well, if we want to work a little bit longer, we'll go straight into the governing board. And start having discussions on that. So whatever the board would like to do.
What do you want to do?
Fine with me, let's move on.
And I say we at least work till 5.
Amen, let's do it.
Alderman Kinsey, though, really wanted to talk about the governing board salary, and he left, so I guess he won't be able to talk about that one, so.
Rehash it.
Okay,
All right,
Mr. Manager?
So we ready to?
Yes,
proceed?
sir.
All right, page 34, this is the general fund. And so, on page 34, of course, you're gonna see the budget highlights. We're gonna get to some allocations shortly, so I'm not gonna really go into what was on the budget page. But under the governing board, page 36, our proposed budget is $322,629. That includes the salary and fringe benefits for the governing board members, other professional services, and travel for the various aldermen and the mayor. And so, as you may remember, in terms of travel, you've got approximately $2,000 that each of you can use, and this is for conferences and things like that. Most recently, Alderman Brinson used some funds to attend the conference. Alderman Prill has used some to attend. So I highly encourage you to attend some of the trainings that come across the board throughout the year.
Quick question on the health insurance for the governing board. Is that estimated for those that are currently on the health insurance plan, or are we budgeting for everyone?
We budget for all. We do, because we're self-funded, so then we calculate by the total number of employees and then put that within their line.
And this may be a really stupid question, but for Alderman Astor and Alderman Best, does their health insurance fall under the governing board or retiree?
Great question. We can do a little bit of research and find
I have
out.
my own state retirement.
If
Okay.
they're receiving, yeah, I think if they're receiving the retiree, but it would still be part of the, we take the insurance budget and we divide it by how many employees we have, and then that's how it's, for the health insurance, I should say.
Okay.
And I didn't take it.
So it doesn't matter in a sense.
Okay.
Brenda, would you like to go over what the aldermen are currently allocated annually, and with the monthly breakdown, if you've got that, and also what the mayor's rate is?
For the salary on a monthly breakdown?
Whatever you have.
Okay, I have it annually. The mayor's annual salary is $16,143.10. The aldermen are $11,098.88. And each year, when a mayor pro tem is selected, they receive a slight increase of $877, making their salary for that year $11,975.88.
So on page 37 of this, you'll see some other expenses that the governing board addresses. The biggest increase that we're going to see is in IT restricted. That's $20,420, and it's basically because it's time to buy new computers. And we have that on a 5-year cycle, and so it's just.
For us?
That's correct. It's
I
automatic.
just got used to the one you gave me.
Automatically built in based on the IT schedule for.
How many use the computer? Does everybody use it?
I do.
I do. But, to what I'm used to at home, mine's brand new that y'all gave me 3 or 4 years ago. Personally, I don't need a new one, unless it's something that they can't get services for or anything.
That's usually why we go 5 years, because
Yeah.
at that 5-year mark, then that traditional support for that model dies out.
Good, then buy me an iPad.
That's exactly what I was going to. Ever since we went from the iPad to the computer, I never used a computer the city gave me. I use a personal iPad.
How much easier for me to navigate through an iPad.
We were never really asked, I don't know who made that decision last time, maybe it was an IT decision, but we were never asked when we went from iPads to the laptop.
So the goal is, I do know in talking with Tony that they were looking at getting, because I have like the test version, this is similar, it's like in between, but at least it's a touch screen and you can, it's smaller, you can, you know, move it around.
What's that called?
It is it's not a Surface Pro. Latitude, I think.
That's a Dell.
So,
Dell rough book.
and so this is the time to tell us, would the board prefer iPads, or would you prefer something like the Surface, which Kim is talking about?
I would tell you whatever is the cheaper option for me.
Kim, what is this one? This is the, because I had the iPad first and then they switched to this
Yeah.
one. It doesn't matter to me.
That's the
I
same
don't
one I
care.
had.
Yeah, mine's over.
I don't care.
The iPads, it's like you just open it up and it's always on, you press the icon and it comes up. Those you gotta boot up and you gotta shut down, and that's just.
This works similar to what you're saying, and it's a touch screen, so, yeah.
You don't make me,
And I think
I don't even have to have one, you don't have to.
So we can certainly do iPads.
Can you check and see, I think there was a reason why, it had something to do with the security.
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Security issues.
we'll be able to bring that up tomorrow. Well, you know, a lot of the departments have iPads, and then are using them out in the field for one reason or another, so, we'll talk to IT to see if there were any issues with getting the board on that.
Okay.
Then we have, also on page 37, contribution to Allies for Cherry Point tomorrow. That amount is $14,200. Then the Highway 17 Transportation Association, that is $12,500, and those are ongoing allocations.
What do we do with that? Well, I mean, Highway 17 Transportation Association, what does that?
So I believe Alderman Priel is on that committee, is that correct? And so, do you have any background information on that group, Brenda, that you could share?
It's obviously, a lobbying effort for Highway 17 coming through Bridgeton and going all the way down through
Okay.
the Jacksonville area. And the income, or not the income, the revenue, by having additional travelers should produce for this area. That's what we've been told in the past by the
And trying to
lobbyists.
make it a 4-lane,
Right.
Yeah.
the advocacy for that.
And once that project is complete, however long it would take DOT to complete it, there had been indication lobbying services for that effort would not be needed anymore.
Well, it's gonna be a long time before they 4-lane from Washington to New Bern.
Isn't it allocated?
I think so, right? I mean, I don't know that it's allocated, there is a plan for it.
I've had a plan, I
Yeah.
thought the majority of it was allocated, but.
Yeah, I don't think through Bridgeton yet.
Any
Or
other-
Creighton County, I guess I should say.
Any other comments on the governing boards budget? All right, on page 38, this is administration, that basically covers the city manager, assistant city manager, the city clerk, and the public information officer, and administrative assistant, city hall. And on page 40, proposed budget is $993,383, and that includes the salaries and benefits, other professional services for the city manager of $30,000, and that goes to fund things such as certain grants. There are certain times we use that if there are any appraisals and things that don't fit the criteria for the special appropriations line item of community and development. We are proposing $2,500 for community engagement. I think it's important that the city be represented, and we have a lot of departments that do go out and set up for a variety of events and activities, and of course, administration was set up at Mumfest last year with a tent and things, and so I think it's important that we are visible as a city to engage with the citizens.
What is the other contractual services for 50,000?
Let's pull some details so we can see that. Yes. It is on page 41. Bear with us one second. Yes. So I believe that is, one is for New Bern Alerts, which is approximately, is that New Bern Alerts? New Bern? I believe. So New Bern Alerts, and then the remainder of that is for additional technology to help with, I think it's important that we continue to move to try to communicate with our citizens with technology. We see that constantly increasing, and one thing that we don't have are survey mechanisms in place, and so we'd like to use some funding to work with a developer on something like that, to where we can do a citizen survey on an annual basis in a variety of patterns, whether they fill out a form or whether they do it online, and tell us how we're doing overall. That way we can really use information like that ongoing to help with our budgets moving forward, to make sure we capture what our citizens, what we think is important to the citizens. That's a great tool for that. Also, just communication in a variety of other ways. We're starting with the citizen responder this year, but the one thing that we're not seeing with the citizen responder that we don't really like is that a good way for citizens to be able to follow up and see exactly where we are in the process of things. And so current technology that we're using with our GIS is great, but that follow-up piece, unfortunately, that costs a little more to do that. And so and I think that our governing board would like to see a piece like that too, because I get a lot of requests from each of you, and no one likes anything to fall through the cracks. But we have a way to track that and get automatic notifications as those projects are moving on down the line.
Can I go back to step one? That Highway 17 Association we were talking about a few minutes ago. Do you know if Craven County, Bridgeton, and River Bend, and those communities are also a member of that association?
We would have to get some information on that. We can certainly look into that and let you know.
I can tell you Craven County was. There was some discussion last year about whether or not they were going to pull out. I do not know the result of that discussion. Because apparently few of the commissioners were not happy as to how responsive they have been, because, you know, essentially the northern part of Craven County has been left out of all of that.
And
I don't know. I don't know if they decided to pull out of that or not, but they were in it.
I thought maybe, looking in the audience, maybe Jordan or Chief or you might know years ago, the lobbying was very important, but now that they've gone to the STIP and the MPO, I thought that sort of negated the reason to have a lobbyist anyway, the way the whole process works.
Yeah, I'd like to know if Craven County is a member.
Waiting to hear now.
That's service. Thank you, Fox.
Yes, sir. If I don't have it before we leave today, we'll have it for you tomorrow.
We tried to pull it a few years ago, and I think he came and did a presentation and we left it in there, if I remember correctly.
We'll have some more information. Any other questions on administration? Page 43 is legal. Recommended budget is $311,822 for our legal professional services, which includes 2 attorneys. That fee is not rising this year. Every other year, the city attorney comes back with proposed increase based on the CPI, and there is no increase this year. On page 45, we've got special appropriations. So, on page 46, you'll see the detail. What we have is $16,000 for the Alliance for Economic Development, $2,000 for City Hall Christmas decorations. Traditionally, we have been allocating $75,000 to the public library. This year, we received a letter requesting that allocation be increased to $90,000. So I'd like to definitely get feedback from the board on.
We're contractually obligated for 75, correct?
Yes, we are.
And who requested the $15,000 increase?
That was the Friends of the Library?
Yes.
Was that?
I mean, I'll just say I'm not interested in giving additional funding for that.
Nor am I.
Nor am I.
Alderman Brinson?
No.
Okay, so you have 4, so you can take that back down to. Hey, we actually accomplished something today.
How about it?
That was an easy one.
Then we have appropriations to the mayor and the governing board, $1,000, where you're able to use those funds for certain criteria. And we can let you know tomorrow if you don't know what your current balance is. We can have that for you tomorrow as well.
Kim, could you maybe circulate, it'd be beneficial for probably the existing members, but definitely the new members, letting them know that policy or whatever those guidelines are on what that could be spent for?
Yes.
That might be a good idea.
I think it's in the notebook they received when they first took office.
Okay. Could you send it to me, because I probably don't have that notebook anymore.
Yep.
The bottom line, the community development, we increased that to $100,000. Traditionally, we keep $25,000. That additional $75,000 is in case the governing board doesn't want to look at any type of planning. So we're happy to hear the comments you have on that.
Any type of what?
Any type of planning. We discussed some planning. Now, of course, as we said, we're waiting for the School of Government to start to come down on the strategic plan that we are pulling out of this year's budget. But any other future planning that the board would like to see, there had been some discussion on some doing that we could have that $75,000 to go toward that. So happy to proceed as this board would like to.
What suggestions was planted for this board?
So during one of the workshops, Alderman Krill brought this up. I think Alderman Brinson had discussed as well some future planning for the city. Downtown planning had been discussed previously. Of course, anything with downtown planning, if it's within our MSD, funds can be pulled from that. But if we're wanting to look at anything outside of the downtown, then we'd have to allocate some funds for that. So it's really, if the board wants to do anything with that this year or not.
Okay, and that's for citywide?
Citywide, that's
Okay.
correct.
Yeah. So I thought we were seemingly moving on 2 different fronts there, where it was really going to be some short-term planning, at least for the next 3 years.
That's the strategic plan.
Which this one is actually like 5 to 10 to 15, whatever we decide. Okay, with a consultant.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
just being responsive to what I've heard from several of the members to give you an opportunity to whether or not you wanted to do that or not.
Okay, so whatever planning you come up with, it has to come before the board, and of course,
That's
we
correct.
discuss it,
Right.
move
Absolutely.
forward, okay?
But we're just trying to budget it right now.
I got you.
Any other comments on that? All right, PEG channel, page 47. So capital for the PEG channel, we do need to replace the video server. That thing, the age is on there. If that goes down, then we lose the PEG channel. But total budget for the PEG channel is $64,350. Some highlights of that are $29,000 for professional services for live broadcast, recording and indexing of the city board meetings, as well as social media live stream and sound search capabilities. $6,000 for professional services for video production of government programming, so we have a variety of vendors that do that with us. And $4,200 for live streaming to Roku, which has so far been popular with folks that want to see that on that platform.
I'm gonna bring this up. I probably should have done it in the previous tab, but I forgot. And this may wrap us up for the day, but the City Hall elevator project is soon going to be complete. And I don't know about you all. I don't know if you've had a chance to walk through it or take a look at how this thing's going to be laid out. But I mean, I have some concerns with how we're going to be structured inside to manage that. Foster, you know, I've had some conversations about this. Currently, we talk about safety and security of the building. If we don't make any changes, we're going to have 2 public ingress and egresses to City Hall. I don't think the plan is to have a receptionist in the vestibule area when you walk into the elevator. So I think personally, I think it's a little odd that you walk into a public building and you just punch a button and go up on an elevator. I'm sure our police chief probably has some thoughts and opinions about that as well. So I don't know if there's any plans or if there's any ideas that we need to be discussing from a funding perspective, but I have some concerns with that whole layout myself.
So the annex will have security cameras, one that will be monitored by a variety of staff as they come in. We'll also have, as you walk in that main entrance, and I'm happy, anytime any of you would like to take a tour to see what it's going to look like, let me know. We're happy to walk you through there. As you come in, there's going to be a video monitor that basically gives you directions on whether you want to see the city clerk, city manager, PIO, or which floor, City Hall, the courtroom is, or anything like that. There'll be some detailed information on that. But just like there will not be anyone there, there's just not enough room. The hallway is not wide enough to really sit at the desk and be user-friendly. So you will come in there, you will go up either the steps or the elevator for half the floor, or to the second or third floor to get to the appropriate locations you wish to go. The bad thing about this project is, as you go from the new building to the old, you're going to narrow corridors. And so those corridors are basically where the restrooms on the first floor and second floor and the hallways used to be. We anticipate, I think they're waiting on a few more things for the windows on the, I believe it's the first floor that they haven't done yet. Once they do that, they're going to be finishing up on the floor and some woodworking, and hopefully by mid-June, we should be doing a ribbon cutting for that building. And so we're looking at adding some historic images of Newbern to put in there on the walls to dress it up and make it look nice. And we'd like to kind of also segue that in the next budget year with a tour where if anyone wanted to come in, they could actually take a walking tour, whether by QR codes or something they could download to their phone to guide them through certain areas of City Hall. But cameras everywhere is what we're going to be doing.
So it's basically laid out like Craven County is, so the Craven County Administration Building. When you go in, you can go into the building, jump on the elevator and go to whatever floor or whatever.
That's correct. That's correct.
And when you walk from the elevator, if you're going on the first floor, when you get off the elevator, you're going to walk through Brenda's current office now to get to the main lobby. So you're going to walk through an office to get to wherever else you're going to go, which because of the vault that's there.
The flow is not good, and in reality, what we're probably looking at is moving the clerk to an area that's back where the suite is of the city manager and assistant city manager. That way we can create a better flow to get out to that main entrance of City Hall, and then you can come into that suite.
And I didn't bring this up because I don't want to spend a bunch of money on this either. I just wanted to say that if there were some thoughts that need to be addressed, I think it needs to be addressed now versus 6 months down the road, we come back with another budget amendment like we did for the rest of the stuff in City Hall.
And we don't want to do that either. And I think if we do spend any funds, we've got some funds in this current budget
Okay, so we made it to technology, so tomorrow we have, technology, finance, HR, police, fire, parks and recreation, development services, and public works, which is quite a bit.
And so we do that, then we have the other two items on the agenda, which is the ARP funding, to give the board an update where we stand on those projects, and then we've got a couple pieces of property to discuss.
And Foster, you and I had this conversation. I don't know as if the whole board knows or not, but FEMA has obligated the BP building. So we're through with that project. And both the state of North Carolina as well as our consultant, and I agree, think that we should do if we're gonna do a scope of work, change the scope of work, we need to do it as quickly as possible. So we need to discuss what we're gonna do with that funding.
So that was, the old BP fell under Public Works for building and ground, so maybe tomorrow when we get to that section, we can,
We can go ahead and approach the subject, y'all, and talk about the things that have been discussed previously when that building was originally damaged by Hurricane Florence, and then any other ideas the board may have.
Yeah.
yeah. So, it's a pleasure of the board to, we need to continue this?
Recess.
Okay, so if the board is ready, we need a motion to recess this meeting until tomorrow here at City Hall at 1 p.m.
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned.